Welcome to episode 45 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week we are continuing our preseason team analyses with Richmond, Port Adelaide, and St Kilda, specifically in that order, just because it works out better in terms of our flow. We are also going to be covering the Indigenous All-Stars game, which is happening this weekend, this Saturday. So we're going to run through everyone who's playing on the Indigenous team, maybe a little bit of Fremantle, maybe a couple of the ins and outs that we know of at least. And so let's jump into it. How are you doing, Mr. Psyrick?
Not too bad, not too bad. Pretty busy weekend for me. Had a sort of couple of outings. Took part of Fringe Festival, went to a few more things as well, got into that. Also went to a concert on Sunday, which was held at the East Perth Power Station, which closed around 30 years ago, I want to say. It's older than I've been born. So yeah, it was sort of weird. It's the first event that's ever been held there. No one died. There's no old electrical wiring still loose coming up from the ground or anything.
Lucky.
But yeah, that was a really fun concert. Most dancing I've done in a concert for a while, which was pretty good for my old age. I thought I held up pretty well. But I went out yesterday, and whenever I was just standing around, I kept on reaching in the pocket for my phone, thinking again messages. But turns out that I must have danced a bit hard because that was just my quads twitching. So
maybe you might have gone a little too hard.
Say too hard, but definitely when you get to my age, recovery tends to be a bit more of a process. You know what I mean?
True.
You'll get there. You probably experience a tiny bit.
I experience it now when I go for my runs. My calves are not happy with me afterwards.
Yeah, no, that's always the thing. I think I mentioned before, I used to get roped into a few park runs occasionally, and not being able to walk for a couple of days afterwards, it's always a way. I can do them, but it's not very graceful, so
yeah.
I think you're going about it the good way. I've seen your times, getting closer to that 30 mark, Blazy.
Yeah, when I did my run 2 days ago as of recording, I wasn't expecting. Well, it was like a day and a half ago technically. It was like midnight, Sunday night, whatever. But yeah, I was my last time was like 33, like 18 or something like that. I wasn't expecting to break sub 33, let alone I wasn't expecting to break sub 32, let alone sub 33. So I think my current time is like 31:12 or something like that. So yeah, that 30-minute mark is what I'm aiming for, and then just try and stay consistent with that for the rest of the year.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's like the first time you reach 30, you're probably wiped out for a couple of days afterwards because you push a bit hard. But when you're consistently making 30, feeling good the day after, you've made some serious progress, and it looks like you're tracking pretty well.
Yeah, like I haven't really changed much about like my diet and stuff. It's mostly just I have cut back on a couple of things. Like I'm not drinking as much soft drink. I'm not stacking too much anymore. I'm trying to keep up with the fitness program that I've kind of been doing. I'm skipping it today just because of lack of time for recording and then streaming after this. But I might do a double session tomorrow just to catch up, that sort of thing. But yeah, otherwise it's been good. My weekend was fairly busy as well. I was out Saturday and out Sunday. So that was nice. Good to see people, good to see family. And then I haven't got much planned this upcoming weekend, so I might actually watch the footy.
Yeah, exactly. Watch a bit of the preseason games, and of course, what we're going to be talking about today, the Indigenous All-Star game.
Yeah, very much looking forward to seeing some of the stars of the modern era. Take a swing at a bit more of a fun game rather than complete seriousness that is the regular AFL season.
Yeah, as I said, a lot of these things. There'll be a few boys out there, a few young men looking to showcase their talent. A few of the younger players out there. Some of the older ones, it will be more of, the bit of the run and the warm-up sort of thing. But, you know what I said, they do a really good job with it. I think it's really going to be fun, and I am looking forward to seeing that on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, shall we jump into our first breakdown?
Yes. Yes, and I believe you've got the floor, unless yeah.
Unfortunately, I do have the floor because we're talking about Richmond, and I'm not looking forward to this because I've seen the stats and they're not pretty. But we'll start from the
No.
beginning.
Well, the beginning I've supplied you a picture of a couple of cute baby little cubs. Hopefully they'll be cute and ferocious next year.
Well, that's what we're hoping because that's exactly what
We're
happened in the off
hoping.
season. Is we just gained a ton of them.
Mm,
So
but we shall
the
start
story
with 2024, the tough bit.
the story begins before 2024, actually, with the departure of Damien Hardwick during the 2023 season. 2024 started off on a good note with a new coach, new assistant coaches like Chris Newman coming back. Prodigal son returns, and a new game plan. The retirement of Jack Rewalt and Trent Cotchin at the end of the 2024 season gave the players in the 2024 group an opportunity to step up and allow for some to develop as new leaders within the group. Dustin Martin's approaching 300th game was the big highlight going into the season, and the interesting signing of New Zealander and Samoan Makelti Lafau brought in a lot of eyes as Adam Uze took charge. And then the bad stuff. The season did begin well, with Richmond losing 3 games in a row, including the debut of opening round and the traditional round 1 clash. Again, we don't like opening round. This cements it. Unfortunately, it's coming back.
Yeah.
And with Star 2021 signing of Josh Gibcus suffering yet another ACL injury, a bright spot did come early when we beat the Swans by 5 points of round 3. It showed us that despite the early injuries, we had some fight against what would be the runner-ups in the 2024 grand final.
Mm-hmm.
However, the injuries continued to mount. We ended up having 6 ACL injuries across the entire season, which wasn't great. We used, 43 players overall, I believe?
I think 43. I know it was 11 more than Sydney. I can quickly grab it for you.
And then
Players is 42.
42, that's right, yeah. Because I think we had like 3 players either that couldn't play either due to actually being connected to something else, like a basketball contract. So it was like a category
Yeah.
B rookie. One being long term injured, and one I don't think ever got game time. Something like that. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
was the
And to
case.
put it into perspective, West Coast was the only other team to reach 40 players at exactly 40. So it's not often that you even see 40 play in a season, and then Richmond went 2 more.
Yeah, very true. Um, and then yeah, with swirling rumors of player trades and retirements that just held a heavy cloud over the season, with only one more winning coming against the Crows, a win that I actually did not get to see because I was at a
Mm.
like a TV recording event thingamajiggy, which that was cool. But yeah, the fact that I missed seeing the only other win that we got that season just sucked.
Yeah.
But despite some good showings, even in the many losses throughout the season, as we'll go through it, there were a couple games that were pretty close up until like the dire minutes of the last quarter. Uze's first campaign at the helm was off to a bad start. So as we can see in the graph, there was only 5 points between us and Carlton. Only 7 points between us and the Saints. 12 points between us and the Bombers during Dreamtime, a game that I also did not see because I was in Canada at the time. The 6 point victory, is it 6 points? 8 point victory against the Crows. And then everything else was pretty much a wipeout, including the 13-point loss against the Kangaroos. But I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at
Well,
these from memory, if you look at a lot of these, oh, I say a lot of these, look at some of these up till the third quarter, it's fairly close, and it's the last quarter that we fall off.
yeah, and I'll point out, because as I said, a lot of these, we're going to go on to the next slide, and the stats are going to look really bad. But for a lot of these games, it was just momentous, the drop off in the third quarter. Again, Richmond with a lot of these injuries, a lot of players that they weren't even. Because when you're a player, you're sort of preparing for what you think the season's going to go. And, some of these depth players, they're not training like they're going to be training for a 22 game AFL season. You know, fit enough to play at the VFL level and all that sort of stuff. But you know, when you've got your undersized players, especially what we're going to talk about in the forward line and in the back line, you got huge rotation of midfielders. Yeah, as I said, it ended up being a bit much for a lot of these games. And yeah, as I said, like even the Kangaroos game you talked about, yeah, it was disappointing, but again, that only the separation only happened in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, exactly right. I know because I was at that game because it was Dustin Martin's final game, which is really tragic to
Oh
even think
yeah,
about.
yeah, had a chance. Anyway,
Oh well. But yeah, no, the numbers don't look good, and we're gonna go take a look at that now. Sarek, if you wanna take the lead.
once very operative. We've mentioned before the biggest stat for Richmond before taking in any of this was the 42 unique players played. Again, 11 more than Sydney. You're doing that, you're going to get some pretty ugly things. And as you can see, I'm not actually going to go through all of this. I'm going to highlight some of the main things. So, goals were 18th in the league, 9.2. I think they were actually the only team under 10 goals per game average. Um, so yeah, as I said, so it was not, it was a significant drop off. So they got shots and inside 50s a bit less. So 17th and 16th respectively. Goal assists, lowest in the league. They lost a lot of distributors, lost a lot of forward targets, which translated in a very low inside 50 marking and a slightly above worst inside 50 marking rate. Their offensive one-on-ones were worst in the league. They had tied 17th for the amount of one-on-ones generated, which again sort of translate to turnovers not being turned into easy scores. And on ground levels, tackles inside 50, 17 in the competition. Inside 50 ground ball gets 12.8, 16th, which when you consider the low amount of entries, it probably means, as I said, there's still a tiny bit on the ground. It's just not really as much. And as I said, the opposition could easily rebound the Richmond defense at a rate of 78.6, which is last in the league. So all up, it's not going to surprise you. And also accuracy was very low. And it sort of also correlated to, Richmond have a reasonably hard X score per shot. I didn't put it in because, it wasn't lowest among low, but most were pretty difficult. And as you can imagine, like, it was a mix of them only getting relatively the easier shots of the minimal entry. But if they weren't getting that, you know what I mean? It was pretty hard. So they're not traditional forwards, trying to get as many goals as they can from very limited entries.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. And yeah, as I said, unfortunately, they didn't convert as much as a normal forward line would probably convert. So next we'll go on to defense, because I honestly think that all things considered, I don't know, like offense, but like offense was pretty much dismal. You know what I mean? Like a lot of stats were quite far below an average.
The only part of our entire team that was like even the slightest bit consistent was like our halfback line, really.
Yeah, and as I said, so I want to point out in this, like, for how, and it wasn't like defense was missing injuries. Like, I know a lot, and this will be what we talk about later. A lot of this, edging below bottom was the year of Nick Vlaston. He was a center point in that defense, and then
him and Rioli.
A few. Yeah, well, I meant like pure defense.
Oh yeah,
because obviously
Rioli did have to push him forward a couple times, despite being.
Rioli sort of, I would say like most of Rioli's stats fall under movement and all that, but still a good user of the ball. Helps the defense if you can move the ball forward. So, but a lot of these stats, so goals against 15.2, 17th. So, on average, Richmond are getting 6 goals kicked against them more than they're generating. There's a difference of 6 between goals against and goals, which isn't great. Shots against, second most in the league. Opposition goals per inside 50, 16th. set shots per inside 50, 16th, and scores per inside 50, 16th. So slight resistance, but still amongst the worst. Opposition goals, assists, they produced the most in the league. They did struggle with a lot of matchups, which generated a lot of easy marking for oppositions. But one of the positives is their defensive loss rate, 26%, which is not tied ninth in the league. So they were getting exposed often. Their defensive one-on-ones, they gave up 12 per game. Well, not gave up, but you know what I mean. They were forced into 12 per game. And they did reasonably well out of it. And again, it's not even just Nick Floston.
Nathan
Players
Broad.
like Nathan Broad, the young kid, Ben Miller.
Yes, Ben Miller. But he did a lot of development this season, and I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a bit of resistance there, but overall, they couldn't rebound it and defense that much. And the only thing that was really there was they were very high up in spoils. And I know that sort of goes into movement when you're not getting the ball to ground and all that much.
Our high spoil rate definitely goes towards Broad and Miller and Rioli for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of this was just they were forced to take the more conservative options defending because matchup wise there wasn't much room for error. You know what I mean? Like they had to force very mismatched opponents into very strict roles to at least try and combat some of this. So but it is good that they were at least doing the basics right in defense. So worth acknowledging. And their movement, Richmond's middle, probably, I'd say West Coast midfield was probably the worst in the year, but Richmond's weren't that far off it. Possessions averaged 329.4 a game, which was 17th. Differential of a 42 loss compared to the opponent, 17th in the game. Last for clearances, differential for clearances is a 2.8 loss, which is 15th. So at least they're trying post clearance. They're trying to at least limit the opponent clearances. They're getting a few tackles. Again, they're not the most tackling team in the league, but it's decent enough. Which you would hope considering how less possessions they have.
Yeah.
Meters per disposal, 16.7. Kick percentage, 59, which is 10th. But they had a meters gain differential of 582.6 loss, which was last in the league. So meterage, opponents got a lot more. And there's sort of two reasons for that. I probably should have put this a bit closer, is the mark differential. Opponents averaged 24.5 more marks per game than Richmond, which is 18th in the league and pretty big.
Yeah,
so Richmond didn't really have the bodies around. Yeah, I think the next best was like 11 in terms of differential. I'll quickly get that up for you.
Ah, you good.
Yeah. Oh, whoops, sorry, I've got marks since that 50. But yeah, sorry. Anyway, sorry, I shouldn't get distracted by that. Anyway, but so the teenager thing, as I said, is the marking around. Like oppositions tend to move the ball, get a lot of contested chains. Not contested chains, free flowing, uncontested ball movement. Whereas Richmond, whenever they got the ball, they were just scrapping it forward. As I said, they had a reasonable meters per disposal, but often the time it was going to ground. Clanger differential was pretty high, 8.6. They average 8.6 more clangers than their opponent per game, which is most in the league, and significantly higher than their turnover differential. So that when they were moving the ball forward, it was just going to a contest, which was either A, turned over, or B, just just wrapped up for a ball up. Yeah. And they weren't winning the ball themselves. Ground ball differential, 4.9 loss to their opponents, 18th in the league. So basically movement was a lot of hat kicks, a lot of struggling. It meant that they weren't getting many inside 50s, and the ones that weren't that much quality. I will say post-marking, their crumbing was actually quite decent. So I think what you're looking at a lot of this is that there wasn't a lot of structure with their possession because, when it was marking structure, like your normal ground ball movement, and I imagine a lot of these crumbs came actually from defending marks because they didn't take many of these marks themselves.
Yeah.
Oppositions marked against them quite easily. So, you know what I mean? So when they were getting the ball to the ground in structured movement, they were okay. When it was just natural ball movement on the ground, they sort of got out muscled. And when you look at Richmond's age profile and the sort of players, it's not that surprising, really. It's just sort of come with the game.
Yeah, exactly right.
And obviously the biggest thing, the inside 50 differential. Opponents averaged 5.6 more inside 50s than Richmond did, which is just sort of hard to get much of anything, when that's sort of happening. And, the disparity between how easy it is for your opponents to score versus how hard it is for you to score caused a lot of point differential.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just what we were stuck with. We had no other options.
Yeah, well, as I said, it sounds really harsh, and I'm not gonna say like there's not too much you can take for this. Really, what you could see was there was a bit of ground ball pressure, a bit of tackling from Richmond. They just weren't contested, you know what I mean? And they didn't have the bodies to be contested, and everything just became hard for them. Um, and as I said, they were very restricted in what they could do with their sort of possessions anyway. So it didn't amount to much. There are glimmers of signs, but yeah, as I said, I wouldn't read too heavily into the stats. But when, I'm at a muse, I'm looking at what I can do. And really, it's, I guess, getting the veterans that they'll run out next year in position to set up enough to where, the bits and pieces here and there can get picked up by the younger talent that they'll be running next season.
Speaking of, good segue by the way, we're about to talk about some of those because every player that we picked up in the off season is a brand new draft pick. So first we'll talk about. Actually, I'm going to talk about the players that have left us first because without them leaving, we wouldn't have had the biggest draft hand that we had. So we'll start with Liam Baker, who traded to West Coast for a handful of picks. There was talk pretty much all season long about him keeping his options open, but we all knew that he was probably going to end up going back home. Whether it was to West Coast or to Fremantle, no one knew pretty much up until the end. And that was because of our former assistant coach, Minnie, becoming West Coast's new head coach, and him having a good relationship with Liam Baker and Jack Graham, for that fact, is why they both went over to West Coast. Jack Graham went via free agency as he was out of contract. Shea Bolton, as everyone now knows, has gone to Fremantle and will play in the Indigenous All-Star game, just for a note right there. Again, we kind of also knew that he was considering a move back home, but was only open to it if a proper deal could be worked out with Richmond. He didn't want to leave them high and dry, essentially, because again, he does love the club. He just wanted to go back home for family reasons, especially for his partner and his kids, I believe. Daniel Rioli one hurts because one, he's a Rioli that's in the Richmond blood. And two, he won our best and fairest last year. He was our best player by far. He played every game, I think.
It was also a bit ironic that he didn't actually go to the West Coast either, because not the West Coast Eagles, but WA, because obviously the Riolis, they're mainly part Victorian, part WA products as well. So.
Yes, they are. But he wanted to follow in the footsteps of his mentor, being Damien Hardwick. So, which is why he went to the Gold Coast. But we got some good picks out of that. We went out to swindle them a bit. So
yeah,
happily took those. We delisted 2 players, being Noah Cumberland. Thank the Lord. I never rated him at all. Because he would show good signs one moment and then do absolutely nothing the next. So I'm glad he's gone.
I would put him in bowl burner category.
Pretty much.
Really.
And then Matty Coulthard, who never really got a proper try. I think we picked him up not as a mid-season pick, but as an SSP kind of selection because he came from our VFL side. But yeah, just didn't get enough time to really show his talents. I know he's got some good skills. It just wasn't enough time to develop them into an AFL level. And then obviously,
and as you can imagine, in the draft, you're sort of getting more and more lost in the shuffle, considering how much time they're going to be putting into some of the players on the left.
Yeah, exactly right. And then the retired players, three of them, as everyone knows. Dustin Martin, the 301 gamer, who every game this season that he played, he lost, which is very unfortunate. With Hawthorn being spoiler to his 300th game, of course. Dylan Grimes, pretty much the last key member of our backline trio to retire. The other two being Dave Asprey and Alex Rance. He just couldn't get back on the par. He wanted to give it one more try and just couldn't do it. Marlon
Very good role player in his prime.
Absolutely.
Just dropped off a lot.
He had similar issues to what Josh Kipkis has now, is that just his hamstrings and just legs just weren't holding up until he sought specialist help, and then became the 3-time premiership player that we all know. And then Marlon Pickett, we all know his history. Became a very special player in 2019, having won the VFL Grand Final, and then immediately gets selected to play the AFL Grand Final, and just has an absolute blinder of a game against GWS. And then Sam Naismith, ruckman, journeyman, played with Nank when they were both up in Sydney. Came down for one final year after playing with the Burrows in the VFL. Did another ACL and just had to call time. It's a hard life, the AFL journey, but it be how it be. But now we talk about the upcoming talent that we acquired, because we had a draft hand of 8 picks and we used all 8 of them. Oh, actually, we might have had 9. I can't remember. But we used pretty much all of them, essentially. Starting with pick 1, Sam Laylor. Pick 7, Josh Smiley. Just for note, all of these players are from Victoria, which means they're not going to have issues with like homesickness or anything like that. A few of them have even played together. I think there might only be one of them that hadn't played with the rest before, apart from like as opposition. But for the most part, all of these players have played together in one way or another. I think like 3 of them are from the Oakley Chargers. I think one's from 2 of them are from the Stingrays. I think 2 are out from Gippsland, something like that. So there's a history between them already. Pick number 12, Taj Houghton. Pick 14, Jonty Fall. Pick number 21, Luke Traynor. Pick 23, Harry Armstrong. Pick 28, Thomas Sims. And pick 58, Jasper Olga.
Yeah, I did a recheck just to make sure I didn't miss one. And it was just the 8 draft picks. Was just the 8. You know what I mean? But
they're all here.
Honestly, as I said, like, I've already sort of put my, I'm not huge into draft analysis. I can see a lot of sensibility from how they drafted with that hand. And, as I said, specific players and all that. There may be some argument amongst people. Probably not really. I think most people agree that most of the top 20 went pretty much straightforward. Also think Jonty Fall is just a pretty, I don't know, it just seems like
name.
A really cool name.
Yeah.
Jonty Fall.
Jonty Fall.
Sounds like a sitcom character. I think he should be in like 40 Towers.
Well, the only interesting thing about this entire list is that Sam Laylor wasn't originally going to go at pick 1, and that's purely because of Brisbane's father-son pick of Ashcroft. Whatever his first name is. Levi Ashcroft. There we go.
Levi, yeah.
He was originally going to be pick 1. He was always touted as pick 1, but because of Brisbane already having a strong hand on him, that got shuffled down to I think they grabbed him at pick 5 at the end.
Yeah, something like that. It's really nomination. It doesn't make too much difference.
But from behind the scenes stuff that I've seen that was going into this draft, our recruiting team had always kind of seen Sam Laylor as a top 5 prospect, and at the end of the day, we got him at pick 1, and we'll take that.
Yeah, and as I said, it gives him a bit of recognition because pick 1. Sometimes people see it as a curse, sometimes see it as a thing, but at least gives the player a reward for a very well-earned development season leading into the draft, and it may not mean too much afterwards. It is nice to see the kid actually get number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. it's not really hard to go back only a couple of years and you look at the past couple of number one draft prospects, and like apart from what's his face over at West Coast, Harley Reid, like all the other number one draft picks of the past couple of years have taken like at least 2-3 years to like really start shining into
Yeah,
the
a
players
couple
that
of
we know
key
they can
forwards
be.
with Aaron Cadman and
Juan Francis.
oh yeah, Juan Francis, obviously.
I wouldn't say Sheasel
Yeah,
because I think Sheasel had a really good debut year. Same with
yeah, for sure.
oh no,
He's
actually
just a
she
player that sort of.
was Sheasel the number one draft pick. I can't remember. He was like top
I don't think
five.
so.
I
I
know
think
that
he was
much.
8.
We
I think he was
mentioned it
8.
literally last week and I've already forgotten.
Yeah.
I think he was
No, Sheasel
three,
was same
and
draft as Juan Francis.
was he three? And then I think George Wardlaw was a year after him. He was like pick 5, something like that.
Well, his third pick, and he's got 3 on his jersey, so.
Yeah, there you go. That kind of lines up. Anyway, besides the point, we're not talking about North now. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I do have a lot of hopes for these kids, especially with like the couple of kids that we've picked up in the past couple of years as well. I think they'll be a really good group to develop together. I just hope that, especially with the 2 players that we picked up in our mid-season last year, one being Jacob Blight, who I'm actually going to talk about shortly, and the other being I've already forgotten. It's in my head somewhere. I'm sure I will find it. But yes, no. So let's move on to the players of importance. The key one being Tom Lynch. He needs to fix his injuries. I don't even need to look at what I've read right now or what I've wrote down right now. His plaguing foot injuries just were a massive curse on last season because I bet he would have 100% been happy to be out there even if it was only at like 80% ready to just help support that team as a leadership figure because we had nothing out there. Like even if he couldn't do all too much up forward, just having a better on-field leadership presence would have gone a long way.
Yeah, because when you consider last year the optics, obviously they're signed LaFau, but no one had any idea that he would be half
good.
decent,
Yeah,
let
exactly
alone
right.
a solid contributor. So that was the next step down. People were, I would say, Kaczynski was very ish. I don't think many people thought he was going to be.
I think he got better as the season went on, but it's still going to be a little while longer.
It's a big step down from Tom Lynch, is what I'm saying.
But yeah, sorely missed for his goal kicking and leadership up forward. Eyes will be on Tom Lynch to get over his injury woes and perform effectively alongside Laval, Kaczynski, Bauer, Sonsi, and new kids like Jasper Olga and Thomas Sims. For note, Lynch has only kicked 15 goals in the past 2 seasons, in comparison to 63 goals in 2022. So you can see injury, and especially like the foot injuries and leg injuries, have like really plagued him. He's had a couple of finger injuries, but they haven't been like massive in terms of like his foot issues and ankle issues. So yeah, we need him desperately to perform, especially now that Jack's, not there. We don't have that sort of key forward presence.
Also, it should be stated that 15 goals is from 8 games. So you're looking at about just under 2 goals per game.
And then, that's basically 2 goals per game across like 4 games per season.
Yeah, which is still less than 2022, which is like, what, 2.8 if I was to say on the head?
Something like that, yeah. Next on the list is Maurice Rioli. Now that Dan has left, all eyes are on Morris. But after a poor run of form in 2023, Morris's running and tackle pressure surprised everyone when he came back into the side in 2024. He wasn't initially in the side just due to him not actually being in our Test 22, which is fair enough. But when he came back in, he belonged perfectly. He was exactly what we needed at that moment, even if the rest of the team wasn't really up to scratch. But with an average of 3.2 tackles per game, 29 in total across the 9 games that he played, his ability to chase opponents and create opportunity is something to keep an eye on in Uze's new game plan. It's like the Riolis of the past. Like Cyril is a good one to note.
But what you say, it's not only just Rioli, but even missing Liam Baker. Because obviously Rioli's probably not going to spend much time in the middle, but the role that Baker used to play when he was put up forward as a very pressure, right at him sort of
Yeah, he was
young
a heavy
player.
pressure forward. He was a small pressure forward, pretty much.
Yeah.
Next on the list is one of my favorite players at the moment, Hugo Ralphsmith, who has become quite a wingman, and I wouldn't say definitely not best wingman in the game. I wish he was, but he's developing to be like a top 10 wingman in the competition. I
It's a
think.
tough role, yeah.
I think Ambrosio might be the number one at the moment,
Off
but
the top of my
that's
head, I'll probably give it to you. Oh, Golden.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't know.
I'll argue about it once the camera stops rolling. We're here to talk about Richmond.
But yeah, with Marlon Pickett no longer being in the best 22 for a multitude of reasons. Part of it was injury, part of it was form, part of it was off-field stuff. Hugo was molded to become a wingman rather than just an in and out midfield player. With his pace and height being a major factor in that position, he was able to break tackles, crash packs, and create a multitude of openings to score in 2024. Obviously, there weren't enough, but he's easily Richmond's most improved player from 2023 to 2024, and I look forward to seeing what he can do with healthy teammates around him in 2025.
Yeah. Does he actually play half forward? Because I just put that in there looking
He
at
kind
his
of drifts.
what do you call it, heat maps.
He's
Yeah.
he's
Also,
probably on
he's
the
an
wing, but
aggressive.
he does drift up forward.
He's an aggressive wingman. You know, if you subscribe to the idea of aggressive and defensive wingman, it would be the aggressive half.
He's one of the
I'm not
reasons
sure.
why
I'll
we
put that
had
there.
why we had really good ball movement. Oh, I say really good ball movement. High meterage with ball movement, I should say.
Yeah,
It's mostly him and
exactly.
Rioli and Baker.
Yeah, as I said, it's just like the difference of some of them hitting the targets. Ralph Smith probably could improve in that area, but like, you know what I mean? It's not that far opposed to other wingmen and all that sort of jazz.
Yeah, exactly right. Next on my list is Jaden Short, who is going to be back into defense in 2025 rather than being in the midfield as of Daniel Rioli no longer being there, who was originally, forward but rotated back when Basher Hooley retired. So Shorty will go back to taking a majority of kick-ins and rebound launches, sharing duties with the young Tiger defenders as they get reintroduced from injury or the players that we've signed, like the younger players that we've signed in the past couple of years.
I just put that there because not all of them are coming back round one.
Yeah,
I think
true.
I wrote this.
You wrote part of it. I think. Oh, no, actually,
You
you might have
busy
written all.
last
You
week,
might have
so I had
written
to
all of
fill
it.
in
I think I put
bits.
Shorty, but you might have changed it. Whatever. Anyway,
Anyway,
with a drop in tackling, score involvements percentage, ground ball gets, and intercepts in 2024, this may be the chance for the fifth oldest player to reset and get back to being one of the premier rebounders in the league. I didn't know he was our fifth oldest.
on your list, yeah, not in the league.
Oh yeah, no, in the league.
Yeah,
But yeah, I didn't know he was our fifth
it's the
oldest
fifth.
in
It's still
on
under
our
30.
list. Actually, yeah. To be fair,
It's
we've got like
I think it's like high 28.
who is our oldest player then in that case? Is it?
It would be Lynch.
Yeah, it would be Lynch. It'd be Lynch and then like Prestia, I think.
Yeah,
Because they were drafted. They were drafted
yeah.
the same year, so it has to be them too.
Sorry, well, a matter of months. Sorry, a matter of days actually. Prestia is the oldest, born on the 12th of October, 1992. Tom Lynch was born 31st of October, 1992. And Jane Short is just turned 29 years old this year.
Oh well, there you go. But yeah, no, I as much as I really liked him working like from halfback to midfield because I think he does have a lot of good skill, like in those sort of areas. I think we're gonna need him back as a rebounding defender, especially as Young's still coming back from injury. Brody probably won't want to do it full time because it's not his role. Same with like Vlosten as well. And again, with no Rioli, we're gonna need a bit more of that speed.
Yeah, I should also say I did that ranked off games, not age. So he's actually younger than that. He's just 175 games is the fifth most in Richmond's league.
Currently.
And Nick Vlosten has played the most games for Richmond at the moment. 230.
Yeah, considering he's not really ever all that injured. He's mostly out suspension. That makes sense.
Very durable, yeah. No.
As I keep saying, he has some of the best hands in the AFL.
Like honestly, he could make 300.
Oh, absolutely, he could.
Yeah.
Another couple of years, hopefully no injuries.
Yeah.
Should be fine. All right.
Fingers crossed. Fantastic last year.
Last couple of players on the list is our key defenders that have been injured or One that was picked up in the mid-season and only didn't get that much play time, partially due to injury, partially due to timing, mostly development, stuff like that. Tyler Young, Josh Gibcus, and Jacob Blight. As I already mentioned before, Gibcus went out with an ACL earlier in the year. Tyler Young, I believe, was also an ACL, and that was like mid-season-ish off the top of my head. Neither of them will be back for round one, sadly, as much as I would like that to happen. Jacob Blight was not an ACL, thankfully, so he should be back. Hopefully, he'll play round one. Who knows? But with Ben Miller as an emerging tall defender, who, mind you, Miller was pretty much a protege to Grimes, so he was kind of filling a bit of Grimes and Aspie's role at the same time in his earlier development. He had a good 2024, considering the amount of defending he had to do for a severely undersized defense. Don't we all know it? All three of these players were injured and will come back at different times, but with Bolter out for the start of the season due to him being a little rascal, these three will need at least 30 games between them for Richmond to actually see what their defense properly looks like. And I agree, because on paper, you take out like just the number of games, but on paper, our list, especially our defense, is really good. But whether they gel together and, perform the roles that they need to properly, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And and even with Bolter, because I know he swings from forward and back, but like, you would hope that Bolter wouldn't need to play in the forward line as much.
I would prefer him in defense because he's always been better in defense. But with Lynch probably going to be playing limited games. Cozzy not exactly being there. Lafau doing an ACL and won't actually be back for a while.
Yeah.
Once he comes back, we'll probably need Bolter up forward for a bit.
But it's like I could imagine like Ben Miller, Nick Ralston, and one of these players making up like the core of that back half defense. And so maybe, and that allows you to have a bit more flexibility with Bolter instead of just like choosing where to play him based off the alarm bells,
I imagine
on any particular game.
Yeah, I imagine. Actually, let me go back to that side. I imagine like Young, Gibcus, Vlosten, Broad being like our core four, and then have like rotating players to fill in other spots like Blight, like Bolter if we have to. Shorty, Macca can play down there. Again, I think Hugo can slot into halfback if need be, but predominantly like he's the runner on the wing. Like we have a couple of players who are able to drift into different spots.
Exactly. It's all about just getting that, basically just getting that literal matchup balance. Because as I said, like, I mentioned Ben Miller, like he had a very good year.
Oh, and Miller as well.
It was still, Ben Miller had like a bunch of goals kicked against him at times just because there were just some players that he was matching up on that he really wouldn't be playing on otherwise.
Yeah, exactly right. There were holes all over the shop. There was nothing we could really do. Just exactly is what it is. But we have some possible, high moments that we could look forward to, and that's the development of our draft picks. Specifically, Sam Layla, selected as the number 1 draft pick. His core strength allows him to be able to break through packs and play on ball to support other midfielders like Jack Ross, Jacob Hopper, and Dion Prestia, provided Hopper and Prestia stay fit, especially Prestia. Like, as much as he has some soft tissue injuries pretty much all of the time, when he's fit, he's easily our best midfielder by far, despite his age.
Is just like the opposite of me. He's reaching for that phone in that back pocket. You know what I mean? His hamstrings are always twitching. Unfortunately.
But yes, Layla, I'm pretty sure is going to be an on-ball midfielder. I think that's where his development is going to mostly sit. He'll work again alongside these other midfielders and likely Tim Taranto.
With Richmond's game profile, like some of these players you think work into, or even like Harley Reid, he flirted with the idea of playing up halfback before the Eagles are like, nah, you're going in the middle, son.
You're gonna be our shining star in the midfield alongside injured player Elliot Yeo.
Yeah, exactly. Just if Yo does another knee, drag him to the bench and we'll sort it out. But
Briefly off
saying
topic,
about Elliot though.
but Yo probably should retire, honestly.
Oh, he's so good for West Coast though.
I
You look at
know.
their midfield
It's just,
stats and he does a
but he's
lot,
just
but
injury prone because of the age.
yeah, I know. But
Um,
we'll wait and see. We'll talk about that next week. But
yes, we
I
will.
imagine Sam Layla, with just the amount of young players playing different roles, I think he'll just play in the midfield straight away. I'm with you. I wouldn't expect him to be any other place.
Yeah,
Maybe limit time, maybe shift him forward occasionally, but like I would say, like you're probably looking at 50 to 60 centre bounce attendance percentage next year.
yeah. I think it'll be pretty much like that. If not, he'll be like third midfielder for the ball. That's kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Next is Thomas Sims, who is signed as a key forward. Will likely be coached and trained in the mold of Tom Lynch or Jack Rewalt. Because I know, despite officially being linked to Tassie, he does still hang around the club until he's like completely down there full time. Because he's also still working for Fox Footy as well. So we'll still see him on our screens. He has strong hands
Yeah.
and had an impressive accuracy rate in the under 18 season games, which I believe was like I think it was like 67 to like 75%, somewhere in that ballpark. So it was pretty solid.
Yeah. I'm not actually sure how much accuracy drops between like unders level and overs, but when you think about it, a lot of it's pressure and mental, so
Yeah.
you can
And
imagine it changing
as
too
you go up
much.
to the AFL and even VFL levels, you come up against better opponents as well.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's like, other stats are probably more affected. Like you wouldn't see as many contested marks. So the only reason why accuracy might get worse is again because you're like, oh, I've got limited opportunities, I got to prove myself. But
Yeah, true.
hopefully that should just translate. Plus, everyone deals with that, so
Yeah, exactly right. And then last player that I want to talk about is a key defender in Luke Trainer. He'll work closely with the veterans in Nathan Broad, Noah Bolter. Well, maybe not Noah Bolter at the moment. He's been a bad boy.
I can still train.
But
Oh no, wait, no, he can't.
but he'll. I mean, he's still going to be around the club. Obviously, he just can't properly train.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, he'll work alongside Broad, Vlosten, Miller. Even work with Gibkiss, even though Gibkiss is still recovering. Same with Young.
yeah,
And they'll just he'll be likely be taught lockdown defending and one-on-one contesting opportunities and stuff like that. Words are hard. Because that's those are sort of the areas that Broad specializes in and Vlosten specializes in,
yeah,
and we just need more of that.
yeah. Because you're starting to forget like how systematic Richmond were not only in their prime but still under Uze. Because you could see shades of it. Like we'd mentioned numerous times through the year that their system looked okay. It's just efficiency. Nothing was getting paid off.
Mm.
And I doubt there was anything much to improve that. Like sometimes you can even go like sometimes things are too systematic. You know what I mean? Like they'll go the safe option that will never produce. But it was pretty clear that Richmond, unless a miracle happened, we're just going to get run out.
The
So
defense knew how they
I think,
wanted to play; they just couldn't execute it with the rest of the team.
yeah, exactly. So
All
yeah,
right.
no, it's hopefully he'll be trained under a pretty good defensive-minded team.
Hopefully, and that
Hopefully.
leads us into our reasons for optimism. So we'll start with the first one, being that 2024 was a pretty irrelevant year. I was going to say irrelevant year in
Irreverent,
terms of
yeah.
what we wanted to see from Adam Ruse. The horrific run of injuries was something that became essentially unavoidable to 2025. So 2025 stands to be a completely fresh slate with at least a 90% fit and healthy list of players to work with. Which, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was in my notes that it was incorrect as well, so it's fine.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's meant to be so, but
yeah, it is. I
yeah.
wrote that one, so I that was just my brain working too fast.
That's so cool.
But yeah, hopefully, at least by round one, well, like most of our lists should be fit and healthy. It'll mostly just be the ACL boys, and maybe
Mm.
like a handful here and there. Because as far as I've heard, no one in the off season so far has been injured, unlike other teams.
Yeah.
Which we are going to talk about when we move on to Port Adelaide. As much
Mm.
as you don't really want to talk about it, it's on the list now.
I will mention it, I guess.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
so far from what I've seen, we're tracking well in terms of health, and like redevelopment. So that's good. Our draft selections were excellent, and with essentially a very young playing group growing together in the system, we're bound to see a more gelled playing style, especially as most of our new recruits all came from the same clubs, and also, as I mentioned before, all of them are from Victoria. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head from the 2023 draft or the 2022 draft or even the 2021 draft, to be honest. But I believe most of them are also from Victoria as well. I'd have to double check. Either from
Yeah.
Victoria or they're from Tassie, because I know players like Judson Clark is from
Yeah.
Tassie, who might get picked up when Tassie comes in. I am scared of that because I like Juddy. Um, but yeah, I think having a core group of players who all kind of come from similar clubs or like the same playing area, or even just even just the same state, obviously, will definitely help in towards a better development in the long term. And then last for our reasons for optimism is our off-field staff, actually. Specifically in the medical department was bolstered by former doctors returning and a new high performance manager was brought in to help mitigate the amount of injuries we had in 2024, which I think is a great thing because
Mm.
clearly whatever we had last season was not really working enough, and we just need
Yeah.
better eyes. And to be fair, the high performance manager that we have, I think, came like from a team that was in the top 8 in 2024, like played finals. So
Mm.
and also had a decent run outside of injury. So they might have been
Yeah.
Brisbane's, to be honest. I can't remember, but it's extremely experienced, and yeah, it's good to have what's a hard have a new set of staff in the back that's to help
Yeah.
with fresh set of eyes
Just
and stuff
be
like that.
proactive. Yeah. Because, like a lot of this stuff, like I would imagine that Richmond, like luck wise, is still worse than your average team. But sometimes you always got to be a bit wary that, sometimes I don't want to say you create your own luck for some of these things because a lot of these would probably be free. But the more you can minimize those sort of things, the more you can minimize those sort of injuries happening. Sometimes, if you do all the right things, one or two players that may have been out long term either come back earlier or, don't get injured at all. Or, as I said, if you, because most clubs, they're probably working between 80%, right? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
some clubs will be a bit behind the eight ball. But for most of the time, like 80% of injury time is unavoidable. Is just making sure nothing snowballs into too bad because, as I said, when you're at the point where you're playing rawer players, putting them on the field, like that increases their chances for injury, which is why, as I said, some clubs tend to snowball where others just, don't have injuries for the entire year. Because they don't have injuries, they can rotate players naturally,
yeah,
which prevents even more injury and so on and so forth.
yeah, exactly right. And now for the reasons for pessimism. There are many of them, but we only put down three. There is a massive expectation of the Tigers to still finish bottom four, maybe even bottom two, and our established veteran players will need to step up massively to defy those expectations. I'm going to give a little preview to how I see my finish ladder in my head because I haven't written any of this down at the moment. We will finish bottom four. Um, Whether we
Mm.
finish bottom two, I'm teasing that for the moment. But that's just yeah, like
I'm not. You'll find out in like 10 minutes
in
time.
comparison to the other current bottom four teams, we'd only maybe be able to get over two of them, but it's still slim chances at the
Yeah.
moment.
No, I agree.
Um, Next one. Despite the stretch of games being played entirely in Melbourne, being 7 out of 8 games, 6 of them on the MCG. Fun fact: 2 of them are at Marvel. As majority of teams have bolstered their lists in places they had struggled previously. Whilst Richmond have gone to untested youth, we might not see them overtake many teams next year, if at all. Pretty much goes to the same point as before. Like,
Yeah,
could
exactly.
finish bottom
It's hard to
four,
see
could
many
finish bottom two.
teams. Yeah, it's hard to see many teams that Richmond could be overtaking. Because every team's working towards getting better. So
Yeah, and
even though they're
I
with good
mostly wrote
things,
this point in light of
mm,
North Melbourne's veteran um veteran talent they accrued.
Yeah.
And like yet again, that doesn't necessarily prove that they're going to be a better team, but it shows that they've bolstered up in spots that they actually needed to be bolstered up.
Yeah, North Melbourne's list this year, because last year they just, I mean, it's almost like Richmond this year, but Richmond's definitely a bit more circumstance than less building.
Mm.
Where the team Richmond, North put up last year at the start of the season was very uninspiring. Whereas this year, you could at least see where they might improve in other areas.
Yeah, exactly right. And then the last one, but certainly not the least one, the amount of fines and suspensions that the players received on field in 2024 was a lot worse than previous years. And I'd like to see them show a little bit more restraint in their frustrations when things do not go their way. Please. This stems from a couple of things. Like part of our old game plan under Dimmer especially was again, was that half forward hard pressure. If you infringe
Yeah.
out, you'd be able to cause a spoil or a thingamajiggy and get the ball back and play in our way.
Basically, you give up a few free kicks, but you take that so you can impose a game plan.
Yeah, which is why we were always last in the free kick count every year. Yeah. Because that's just how our game style was. But now that, we're kind of shifting, we need to show a little bit more discipline in just terms of how we play the game. At least for this, maybe this year, maybe next year as well. Just to, because that'll contribute better to, I guess, the younger player development process as well. Because it shows, don't get angry.
They won't spend all their money on suspensions, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly right. We'll be able to afford more players.
Maybe.
All right.
I actually agree. Yeah.
You have the final verdict.
Oh, yeah, my verdict. As I said, Tigers fans will probably agree. Tigers fan being you, that they don't need their positional change.
It would be nice,
finishing 18th,
but it's not necessary.
Yeah, finishing 18th wouldn't be the end of the world. But as I mentioned, they want to see what a fit team with a game plan can do, and do a lot more than just scrap out, for 3 quarters and then just get blown out in the last. So what they want to see is fitness improve. They want to see solid positional structure, and any wins would just be a bonus.
Pretty much.
Not surprisingly, Psyrick's predicted range, I put him 16th to 18th, which is bottom 4 lock. I forgot to write that in, but that shouldn't be any surprise. One of the few locks. I haven't put too many locks this year.
No, you haven't actually.
Maybe I got a bit burnt last year, but yeah, I don't know.
I wonder which team you have 17th. Is it a team from out west, perhaps?
Hey, look, we've still got St Kilda and Port. It could be Port.
Knowing you, it definitely will not be Port, and we're about to go to that right now.
Yeah. No, we got the ladder.
I already showed the ladder. We'll catch up on the ladder at the end anyway.
Yeah, all right. Richmond 18th. You can see it. We'll run through the ladder at the end. So we're up to Port, and in the media, you probably heard it. Apparently, it's going to get announced before the season. Maybe it's the end of the season, but there's apparently going to be a succession between Ken Hinkley and Josh Carr. And I sort of made this slide and actually found out that this series, I know nothing about it. It's been going on for 5 years. Succession.
It actually ended very recently, like last 6 months.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it was a really solid show.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is Succession is a series about handing over partnership. Should only go for 1 or 2 seasons. 5 seasons is a lot. Like, at some point, the succession has to happen.
Are you telling me that Ken Hinkley has overstayed his welcome?
I'm saying that this is sort of where Port Adelaide are at. Like, I don't know. Like, at some time, I think a lot of fans are, like, wanting some direction. So, hopefully, if something gets announced, at least you get a bit of breathing room for this season. But, like a lot of these reviews, I'm not going to talk about coaching unless it's very specific. We're going to talk about team structure, and we're also going to talk about 24. Because, essentially, 2024 was still a pretty decent year. I mean, Port finished second, so that's always like nice. But the Ken men started out promising enough. 4 wins out of 5. The only loss being to the D's, all against not easy teams, but the worst being the Dockers. None being in the top 8 by the end of the year. So, first real test, Magpies at the MCG, started off like a house on fire. Everything was looking great. And then they sort of fell in the heap. It's where us defensive problems started to happen. We got absolutely torn up by the small forwards for the Magpies, especially one Bobby Hill. He absolutely tore that game. I still have nightmares of it. If he wasn't so likable, I would be in cold sweats as I speak right now. And after that, more mixed bag. Pretty mediocre win against the Saints. Lost to the Crows. Another showdown where we, even though we were tipped to be much above them, we couldn't get the job done. And then we just go to Goomba and thrash up the Cats. Solidly beat the Cats. And yeah, that thrilling game against Hawthorn, 1 point. I was about to say Zach Francis. Not even any of that was right. Darcy Byrne-Jones kicking the winner.
You're thinking of 3 different players at
I got
once.
the hyphen. Yeah, exact. Yeah. Anyway, so, and a bit of struggle after the bye. 3 losses on the trot. Blues, Giants, Lions. All contenders, but very disappointing. None the same, especially the loss against the Lions. They absolutely obliterated us. And it really looked solid. It really looked like, they were a bit behind the 8. And, people were saying, oh, sack Ken. So, a bit of noise come back. He turns it around. Some really solid wins. The best win probably being against the Bulldogs. Second best win. It was empathetic. Empathetic? Wasn't empathetic towards the Bulldogs. I had no empathy. I was all about the Port bandwagon. Yeah, so, did that. Loss against the Suns. But the biggest one was that 148-36 win against the would-be minor premiers. They absolutely smashed them. Didn't let them get a score until it was, 71-0 before,
I believe
they
so.
got their score. So, it was pretty great, and ended the season in flurry. I think it was 5 wins on the trot. Biggest win streak going into the finals. 6 wins on the trot, I should say. And then, as you can see on the next flag, slide. They got hopeful. You thought it might be a bit different this year, and then the Cats go to Adelaide Oval and absolutely destroy Port Adelaide. Like, this was by far the worst of the 2 final spanking. Like, the Cats were very ruthless. Port had absolutely nothing. They'd lost Dan Houston. They'd lost, I was going to say Josh Sin. Here's the other one. Kane Farrell on the halfback. Forward line was in tatters too. We were playing Josh Dixon, injured and out of form. Josh Dixon? Charlie Dixon.
Who's now retired.
Yeah. Todd Marshall was unavailable. And, as I said, it was just a bit of a mess. Our forward line wasn't that great anyway. Cats destroyed us. We thought, oh no, we're going to go out in straight sets to the informed Hawthorn. It's just going to be old bears repeating. Another win. Great one against Hawks. Things are looking good. Things are bright. Maybe we'll go somewhere. Swans of the SCG are absolutely flattened again. It was pretty much no contest. Honestly, again, I mentioned it. Swans probably could have destroyed us more. Maybe that was like a warning sign that Brisbane, were about to take advantage. Like their victory wasn't as good as probably it looked at the time. But
yeah, to be fair, despite what the scoreline says, I think Port made them play a hard game, and that's probably contributed to why they just got absolutely thrashed against Brisbane.
Yeah, well, no, actually, I don't think they made him a hard game, but you know what I mean? Like, around the ground, it wasn't as bad. It was just, and as I mentioned, throughout the year, and what we'll see next, is Port had a really bad forward line. Like, a couple of really good key players in it. Obviously, Mitch Georgiadis had a fairly solid year. Willie Rioli contributed at times. We got goals from our midfield unit fairly healthily. But the drop off, Darcy Byrne-Jones trying enough, he tries a lot, does a lot of good pressure things, but not really a forward. Frankie Evans, you'll see that coming into the list changes when we get to that. Played almost every game. Really not a forward. Probably one of the worst metric small forwards in the league that year. So hopefully we see a bit of improvement on yet. But that's pretty much where the Bucks stop with Port Adelaide. They could rack up scores against pretty poor teams or, loose pressure teams. But when it came to the grittier teams, they just couldn't generate enough score. Unless the game was completely on their terms, which they could do from the midfield, it just wasn't happening for them. And yeah, as we said, we'll go through some of the stats to reflect that. And honestly, it's a bit weird because, it's like you look at it, the stats, and you probably think the midfield's probably a bit worse than it actually is because they're probably one of the better midfields in the competition. But there are problems with, especially at ground level, especially, with some of their disposal as well going inside 50. But the offense will start off that. Goals, 11.9, 12th in the league. Pretty bad for a team that finished second on the ladder. Shots, 28, third in the lead. Fantastic. Inside 50s, 54.6, tied fifth in the lead. Absolutely fantastic. Where it's not fantastic is the accuracy, 42.6%, worst accuracy in the league. Taking the hardest shots on ground, 3.06 was the return on any given shot expected. Worst in the league. So they were taking the hardest shots and not being accurate from them. Goals per inside fifth, 21.8, which is tied 15th in the league. Really not good enough for how many entries that they're getting because they got a lot of set shots. Sixth in the league, 45.7% chance for any inside 50 be a set shot. And scores per inside 50, 51.3, second in the league. It just wasn't converting. It didn't matter that their marking rate was high. Again, third and fifth in the league for both marks inside 50 and the marking rate inside 50. So they were great at getting marks inside 50, great at, when you level out the inside 50s, they were still retaining them. The only thing that was a bit lower, ground ball gets inside 50, 15.2, which is tied fifth. We were good at tackling, but not so much at winning the ball. A lot of tackles inside 50, first in the league, 13.2. Offensive one-on-one win rate, first in the league, believe it or not, 30.9. But offensive one-on-ones, fifth in the league. But again, when you think about one-on-one win rate, it's the leads that go in the boundaries that are very, very safe that teams often give up. So again, you got to keep in mind that a lot of these shots are Port taking very conservative options, and Port tend to do fairly well off the rebound as well. So some of those turnover one-on-one contests were going in their favors as well. So again, when you look at one-on-one stat, you might be tempted to think, oh, they've got strong-bodied key forwards, and it's still partially the case. But a lot of that stuff is actually a lot of uncontested work more than anything, because if you win a lot of uncontested, if you got a high win rate, a lot of those stuff are probably going to be the easier options. So yeah, and again, easy to rebound out of their forward line. And I just thought it was sort of a funny thing to mention at the end. The coast-to-coast score, they are the kicking kings. They get 5.9 average score per game from the kick-in, most in the league, first. They are the coast-to-coast champions, Blazy. Put a crown on him. Absolutely.
Do we have to, though?
Oh, man. It's important, Blaze. That's 5.9 more points than not getting 5.9 points.
True.
It doesn't mean much.
No.
It does mean that they do favour fast ball movement, and their backline movement's probably pretty healthy. But yeah, as I said, I just thought I'd put that in there. Heading over to defense, and this was sort of a hard one to analyze. And honestly, there weren't actually too many key metrics. And I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing, but in terms of an overview, like there's things I've put on here. They've got a pretty average defense, 8th in the league, still top 8, but for their reputation, probably playing a bit under. Goals per inside 50, again, lacking a bit. 23.4 chance to get a goal per inside 50, which is 10th in the league. And opponent shots, we tend to limit it. 22.8 shots per game, which is 5th in the league. So they were really good. And when you look at the shots differential, Port would get an average of 5 more shots than their opponent, which for most teams would end up in a victory. And it was still enough to get them second on the ladder in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
But those games where they weren't converting, you know what I mean? It was just tough. So oppositions, they could get a lot of set shots per inside 50, but often given up in fairly not tough positions, but you know what I mean? Often coming from rebound. I would say that, you know, considering the scores per inside 50, you know, was still fairly low. The rebound rate, they were able to get it outside of 50. A lot of those set shots weren't that damaging. And they were also one of the best teams at preventing opposition marks inside 50. So number one in that. Opposition mark inside 50 rate, 19.6. But as you can imagine, you're like, oh, well, why is there a bit of difference? I will say I didn't record the stats, but I did have a look, and Port's defense did give away a lot of free kicks. So technically, when you give away a free kicks, they don't register in the marking stats. So
Yeah.
Depending on what the umpire feels like. Sometimes the umpires will play a mark and all that. So, so opposition inside 50 ground ball gets 13.8, very restrictive in that, 4th in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And again, all these stuff should be edging towards a top defense. But what we really got burnt with, you know, it wasn't so much the turnover count. Like the turnover, we lost points in that, but it wasn't as high as other teams. But because of our turnovers leading to one-on-one contests that got lost easily, 31.1, 16th in the league, and we conceded the 3rd most, that should be the opposite. That should be 18, 17, 16th in the league. I've gone the other way around. We conceded the 3rd most amount of one-on-ones in the competition. So basically, and I've told you a lot of this, Port press up high. If they turn the ball over in their ball movement, they get really burnt the other way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you often see like players meters ahead of their opponent. They'll get easy shots. So as a whole structure, they're pretty solid. In terms of the overall product, a lot of what was sending them back was sort of just the game style and sort of the give and take from that. So they weren't an overall beast of a defense. They had some areas that they were really good at, but for a terrific defense, they just let a few too many easy goals through.
Yeah.
And finally, we'll go on to the midfield, lump that in with the movement stats. Not a high disposal team, a nice 333.3 disposals per game, which is 15th at the league, but their possession differential, they average 1.1 more than their opponents, so around 10th in the league. So they weren't getting smashed in anything. And in terms of meter gained, they were very healthily above their opponents, 163.5, which is 5th in the league. Clearances, around par, 37.5, which is 7th, but the differential tended to be a lot higher at 2.7 more clearances than their opponent, 4th in the league, and are very good at centre clearances at 1.8 more than their opponents. Inside 50 differential, disappointingly high. You know, as I said, 5.6, 4th in the league. A reason why we got second, but definitely should see a lot more offensive output, you know, than what was generated from those. So while that is a good stat, you want to see a lot more constructive inside 50s. And Port were a very kick-heavy team. You know, what I'm saying, you know, goes along with this. But their kicking efficiency was pretty garbage. 65.9, tied 15th in the league. And the problem with that was if it wasn't a turnover, if it went to ground, they were pretty bad at ground level. Ground ball differential for the league compared to opponent, 3.8 loss, tied 14th in the league. Hard ball gets differential, 2.1 loss, 17th in the league. Post clearance differential, 4.5 loss, 16th in the league. So if Port are just dumping it out the forward line, if it's not an easy clearance, more often than not the opponent are getting it, and post clearance ground ball get differential 3 loss. So if it's going to ground after a clearance, more often than not the opponents are getting it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I will say is that overhead, they're absolutely terrific. And this is what I'm saying. If a team allows Port time and space, they will outmark you. They'll move the ball with ease. They'll get the easier inside 50s. And they will look so much better than when the game's forced into a scrap. And, and it's not surprising why we saw a lot of variability, not just between good teams and bad teams, but, often, the good teams tend to be the ones that restrict you, but, Port still got smacked at times, with partially due to their efficiency and partially against pressure teams that restricted their marking ability. So, yeah, as I said, a lot of good things. It sounds a bit dire being a Port fan. You've got to be a bit critical of your own team, but there's a lot of solidness. It was just efficiency at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They weren't doing enough with the ball to allow their stat dominance to turn into scoreboard dominance.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And despite the fact that they finished second on the ladder, made it to the preliminaries, the stats don't lie. There were so many areas that they were lacking in, especially again in that forward line, surprisingly. Unsurprisingly from a Port perspective. But
yeah, exactly.
From what your midfield was giving to your forward line, it is fairly surprising how it all ended up.
Yeah, because again, the typical Port thing, you get to see them a few times a year. They look absolutely fantastic. But when you watch Port week in, week out, a lot of the problems manifest. And that's the same with most teams. But this is the exact Ken Hinckley experience. The errors. You're just praying this year is the year where you get 3 games. They're not going to get exposed as much as, other teams. Maybe they get a good matchup and run into the finals. But you just know that there's certain things preventing them from reaching deep. Yeah. You're thankful that they're getting covered on a lot of things, that you can get good years. It's just painful. And again, a lot of this stuff was a forward line. But as we look at the list changes, a bit of look into next year, a bit more optimism, we see that at least Port has targeted some forward line threats. So we'll start with the ins, the trade, the free agents. The biggest one, Jack Lukosius from the Gold Coast, traded to get in, gave a solid first. Was it the first that we got from Dan Houston? I can't remember.
It might have been a first rounder because I think it was a 3-way trade.
Yeah.
So it might have been the first rounder that you got from Collingwood that went to the Gold Coast Suns.
Yeah, something like that. So we ended up trading from that. Exciting forward, arguable whether it's key forward or just a really tall, fast general forward. I rank him as a key. And yeah, as I said, underutilized at the Gold Coast. Flashes of dominance. Played as a defender sometimes, but very inconsistent. And, as I say, Gold Coast, surprisingly not that fussed about letting him go.
Yeah, that's what I was surprised about when the trade happened. It's because we know Lukosius is a great player. It's just, if you were going to really utilize him, he would have been perfect in the developing forward line that they're actually trying to build. Yeah. But no, apparently not.
And it's I don't want to send a pot shot to Gold Coast, but Lukosius had one bad year and everyone went cold on him. But there was so many other Gold Coast players that are always a bit more next year. I find it a bit harsh that Lukosius got soured on so quickly when other players probably could have. I'm not saying go out there and select the Gold Coast, but you know what I mean? I think it was a bit unfair, and hopefully you can find a bit of fresher pastures at Port Adelaide. Talking about a bit of a different story, but Joe Richards, few games in Collingwood, fairly rated, but not enough for Collingwood to keep. Port were offering something decent. So, again, greasing the wheels to get the Dan Houston trade going. They give Joe Richards up. Again, for Collingwood, sort of happy to give him up in order to get Dan Houston. But for Port Adelaide, so much forward talent is needed compared to last year.
Absolutely.
So hopefully, if he's as good as Collingwood would say, this might be a bit of like Patrick Lipinski situation where he went from the Bulldogs to Collingwood and helped out there. But if not, it's a good bit of depth. And finally, the steak knives, Rory Atkins himself comes into the Port as a general player. He can play in the midfield, he can play in the back line, he can play in the forward line. Jack of all trades, probably a master of none, but a depth player nevertheless.
Betraying his old friends at the Adelaide Crows by going to the Crosstown Rivals.
Yeah, Crosstown Rivals. Yeah, I can't really see them having too much of an issue. As I said, the second player sorted to do that behind what's his name? Coast to Coast, Billy Frampton.
Yep.
But as I said, finds a home here. So we'll gladly have him. Probably more help out the development in the Sandville side, which got absolutely smacked around last year. So, as I said, bit of experience there. Never a bad thing. But yeah, as I said, not expecting to see too much of him in the main side this year.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the draft. Probably the two major picks. Joe Berry, small forward, pick 15. Jack Whitlock, key forward, pick 33. Brother of whatever the other Whitlock's name is. One that went to North.
That's right. They were twins, aren't they?
Yeah, twins.
Yeah, okay. That's right.
So all we need for one of them is to be a failed forward to turn into defender, and we might have a Whitlock off.
As we did for the Mackays.
Yeah, the Mackay off.
The one downside is with the Kings is that they're both forwards.
Yeah, exactly. So who knows if we'll see a shootout, but again, Ollie Lord had a bit of a variable year last year. Todd Marshall probably won't be seen. We're protecting him at all costs. And so good to have the stock. Probably won't be played this year, but break in case of emergency for him. And then to finish it all off, we got Christian Morarius. I think it's sort of an outside player, pick 38. Tom Cochran from the rookie draft. Benny Barrett as a Cat B rookie, and Jacob Moss also as a Cat B rookie. Going to the outs, a fair few big ones. The biggest one obviously being Dan Houston, traded to Collingwood. Star gun halfbacker. Got one game to suspension to serve at Collingwood, then is back on the park. A big loss, but in an area where we have a few players, so I'll be crying because I liked him, but I don't think it's going to affect Port too negatively. But it still will be a negative. Delisted though, Tom Cleary sort of fell off pace in terms of his ability to be able to defend reliably tall options and not just get outpaced.
Mm-hmm.
Port's got a lot of tall and slow defenders, so you got to cut some eventually. Frankie Evans, I mentioned him before, played a lot of games, which is why I highlighted him, but he tried hard. I'm not happy to see the back of him, but I definitely think that a forward line's probably better off without playing him. So hopefully he can go at the VFL level, maybe get another crack. But he wasn't really one for this list. Kyle Marshall, another tall bit of depth. Didn't really see much of the park. Let go of him fairly early. Tom McCallum, another tall player. Project. Just didn't pan out. Quinton Narkle, gone to Fremantle. Sparkle Narkle, very moment sort of player, not really consistent enough to make the forward line. He'll get an opportunity for Fremantle in the same state, and the not that Tom Scully, young star playing for Port.
I scrolled up and I saw that note of you saying no, not that one that used to play for Melbourne GWS, who also played for Hawthorn, for mind you. He retired.
That too.
He joined Hawthorn 2019. And then retired 2021. So it was only a brief stint at Hawthorn, but yes, it's not that Tom Scully.
Yeah, the unfortunate moniker of the $1 Million Man, obviously in that big trade for GWS.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first players noted to reach that $1 million contract and just didn't go there. I'm talking about history. We're talking about Port here. Talking about retirements.
Speaking of
Big
history.
Charlie Dixon. Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. His body was shot. He was history in the finals. He played because there was no one else to. Servant of the club. Underrated in a way. I think he got a lot more harder knock.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, he was a fantastic thing. And there's I'll give a shout out to their channel. I watch them a lot. Stat Chat. Do little quizzes, sort of like the Sporkle quizzes we did. And you sort of forget Charlie Dixon's 2018. He averaged 2 goals per game and 15 plus disposals. So he was a big part of their forward line.
Yeah, he
it's
had a monster few seasons there when his body was fit.
Yeah, exactly. It was more just he wasn't always reliable depending on how his body was in marking, and B, as he got older, there was just limited movement. He was pretty much a glorified crash packer at the end of his career. And Trent McKenzie, player in my heart, Big Boot McKenzie, from the Gold Coast as well. Half back, again, just getting a bit old, getting a bit slow. We need some fresh blood down there, so we're just looking at other players who we might talk about in a little bit.
All right, let's jump down then in that case, because yeah, it's it is very sad that you lost Dan Houston, especially to Collingwood. Dixon's retiring, Mackenzie's retiring. Like, they're players that were definitely at that point anyway, especially Dixon. Quentin Narkle, we had talked about him when we talked about Freo, but Fremantle is his third team now. Has always kind of been that sort of fringe player. But hopefully he kind of gets a little bit more of a starring role. Well, not necessarily a starring role, but like better opportunities at Fremantle. Because I'd feel for him if he has to go to a fourth club and it's back on the other side of the country.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we talked about it being Fremantle, but yeah, he's just like making sure Bailey Banfield and Michael Frederick remain honest in their forward lines.
And Shea
If
Bolton,
not,
now that Bolton's over there.
I think Shea Bolton gets locked in, or even Sonny Walters, if he's really past it, But anyway, yeah, talk about Port.
And the important players, of course.
Oh, yeah, the important players. Again, these are lists of players that I think, obviously I've started off with a big name, but if they improve, I can see a lot of Port's best qualities being amplified, maybe cover up some of the cracks or the worst bit. And I'm going to start with the captain himself, inside mid, Connor Rozee. And I want to say, all things considered, 2024 for him was decent enough. But I think you've talked about, and we sort of agree, his first year as captain, he was a tiny bit off the mark in terms of some of his bowl youth and his composure. I've said composure on and off the ball. And while I don't think it's concerning, and there's probably some reasons for it, first year as captain, young captain, always hard. Never like players getting the captaincy too early. But Connor Rozee, that was a safe bet, and he still struggled a bit. So support around him. Also had his first kid. That's always like a major life change. And while I don't want to blame it, you know what I mean? It's always one of those things that, maybe, when you find it easier to find a bit of balance after all those sort of things are settled. You might find his feet a bit more this year. But his decision skills have to list because he is the most uncontested inside midfield of the group, and he has nearly the same disposal efficiency as Jason Horne-Francis. And while Jason Horne-Francis isn't bad, you know what I mean? Like, Rosie's meant to be the class, and JHF, while he is good, that comes from a lot of hard contested work as well. So, yeah. For them, you sort of want Rozee to be a bit better than that. So, I will say, obviously Zach Butters is worse than those two. If you're wondering about the consistency or build up, but as
Butters
I said, that's
infringes a lot more. And to be fair,
in terms of infringement, yeah.
Yeah,
no, I'm talking about disposal efficiency.
Oh yeah, I know, but just in general, Butters plays a lot harder, and that it causes infringes, and but it does free up Rozee to do sort of the slicker movement that he's known for.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of the thing where, again, what comes with composure is Rozee is sort of that player where you sort of want Rain back because you don't want him giving away the 3 kicks as well. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, yeah. Moving on now, a bit going into the forward line. We are going to talk a bit about it, but Sam Powell-Pepper, is he a half forward? Probably nowadays when he comes back. He'll also go on the inside mid. Yeah, as I said, it's not ubiquitously thought, or overall thought. I don't know why I used ubiquitous. Probably sounds smarter than I am.
It does sound a bit smarter.
Yeah. That the forward line is his best place, especially, we've run some Sampa, Pepper, Darcy, Burn, Joan forward line options. I think the flexibility that allows, meaning you can free up Darcy Burn Joan, he can go back into the back line. And, I think Sampo Pepper will just be a better version of Francis Evans because he does get more goals per game. He's still tackling in that forward line. And, he can actually take a mark inside 50. It's not great, but it's definitely a lot higher than what Frankie Evans could produce.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not here to slag Frankie Evans. It's just when you compare to league total, it was pretty low.
Yeah.
Some of his stats. So he was in there for pressure. He provided pressure. I'm thankful for that. But when you're looking at step up, we're looking at a player like Sam Pepper getting back into mix after his injury affected last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Talking again in that forward line, Ollie Lord. I mentioned him before. He really struggled to get involved in the games he played in 2024. But with Dixon retiring and the Achilles injury to Todd Marshalls, he should see games in 2025. But he needs to improve his marking element in the game to become that deep option that might act as a centre pin that's like somewhere between Georgie, who will probably lead wide,
Mm-hmm.
and Lukosius, who will probably lead high. So if you got that separation up and out, he might be the one in the goal square. He can get that goals closer to goal, get that accuracy up, kicking goals in the goal square. That's again because Dixon was taking less marks. Like he was getting less, he would get a few easy ones right at the goal square, miss a few, but it's all forward,
Mm-hmm.
tend to pay the tax, you know. But, when you saw that drop off last year, like, Port were never that accurate. But to be that bad, you know, part of the reason was their ability to take marks, 20 or 30 meters out directly in front. Marshall was okay at it. He's injured. So, Ollie Lord, I'm putting the pressure, but, I think he's got the capabilities. Hopefully, he'll be able to pull it off. Go to rebound defenders, and as I said, arguably I could have been talking about key defenders considering the injury to Brendan Zerk Thatcher.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone down, but honestly, and obviously Radicalia,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I think Port's just tinkering around how it's all they play anyway. But I think, again, a lot of Port's games off rebounding, they still managed second on the ladder when they had a strong rebound game. So I'm looking at Sin, Lawrence, and Williams. They're all small defenders / rebounders. And as I said, an opportunity knocks with Houston leaving. They've all shown in their own way that they have the talent of carrying the ball
Mm-hmm.
and sort of fared okay at defensive roles at time in the back half of 2024, especially when they had no support around them when Sin and Houston Sin, that should say, Farrell and Houston, weren't there at the end. I think Sin is sort of the best defender. Williams, it can be, but got beaten a lot last year. But his ball use can sometimes be okay. And Will Lawrence is sort of just the unproven sort of player. He might lift, but again, last year was only his first season, so we'll see what happens. But again, if one of these players take it to the next level, has a 20-ish game, we won't be hurting as much with the Houston loss. Because again, Houston to Kane Farrell isn't the biggest step. They're both offensively minded. They both go up forward, kick goals. So really, it's the responsibility that relying more on Farrell, sort of opens up and you're exposing your younger players. So again, if we get natural growth, won't be as bad. One of these players is going to have to do it. And finally, finishing off, Willie Rioli, small forward, a good year, but sort of frustrating season. Scored enough goals and was like a terrific threat that didn't need much of the ball to be dangerous, but man, he was quiet in that forward line. That on paper couldn't have many players not near their optimum output week in, week out. When Willie Rioli disappeared, there was almost no ground level play.
Yeah.
By thing. And when you're high tackling teams inside 50, like, he's so dangerous at the stoppage. But, it's like a goal here and there is very good, but you sort of need a bit of tackling pressure as well. You need to be running your routes, create a bit of space for other players. And I just think, he does work hard. It takes a while, especially, he still is like a couple of years at Port. A lot of movement in their forward line. Hopefully that will come with a bit of cohesion. But yeah, as I said, it's a lot of tinkering. But I just think like he might have a near all Australian year in him, and it will be a very important part of that forward line. It's just while last year was good, I don't think it's the level we could probably expect a higher level out from him.
Yeah.
And Port will be wanting that.
Yeah. Yeah, but pretty much right. And it's why they need to, as we've already gone over, like their forward line isn't the greatest. And if Rioli's the only one presenting small forward pressure, that's not a good thing, especially when there are games that he goes missing or he's out with injury or whatever. And that's hopefully like with the investment of some of the players in the off season, both draftees and recruit, that'll go a long way in terms of like restructuring that forward line.
Exactly. And, we're going to talk about the fresh faces in a minute. And I didn't put him in there just because I thought 3 was enough. But Joe Berry, he'll be very important to like add some consistency in the mix, to put pressure on Rioli because, you don't want a young kid to be coming into the side and out pressuring you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it does put the onus back on you when you've got talent below you coming up, wanting to prove their worth, Hopefully, and I believe like Willie Rioli, because he is very. It's weird. He does dumb things, but he's a smart footballer with time and space. And, it doesn't always happen, but you know what I mean? Like, you can do very clever things.
yeah,
It's just not, it's almost like the same problem we've had like with the Motlops in the past. We've just always struggled to find that consistency with us moles. But I think Willie actually has a toolkit to actually improve his game. Like, I don't think it's you just accept that part of him. I think he can still improve.
yeah, exactly right.
Anyway, going to the fresh faces. I'll start with Rory Atkins. I'm not actually too much sure why. But yeah, small forward, and I've put as a utility outside player, not technically a position, but any position between the forward line, defense, along the wing. He's not in the guts, but he'll get the ball moving. And yeah, not a best 22 player, but if a player like Joe Barry, who we're pretty invested in, isn't ready for this year, and there's maybe an injury in the forward line, put in Rory Atkins. A young defender goes out for a bit of the year, put in Rory Atkins. Even a winger, if they go down, you can put in Rory Atkins. It's nice to have.
Yeah, that's fair
a good
enough.
versatile. Everyone needs a good versatile Rory Atkins in their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you
It's
mean.
not. Yeah.
We need a versatile everything right now.
Yeah, exactly. Jack Lukosius. Again, fast hockey player with decent marking and scoring, usually goes at a premium, but he just looks so awkward in the Gold Coast forward line. And the most disappointing thing last year is he only averaged 2.2 shots per game. So you can see why he depreciated in value. But again, with Marshall out, he's sort of probably leading the same way as Jack Lukosius would weigh. So he got a blueprint of how he can fit in that forward line. And he's got a good set of hands. I'm not sure if it's going to be as accurate as Marshall. Could be. He did wane a bit, but with Port's structure and his talent, he can go forward. And I'll put down there, Asava can hopefully never have to play as a forward option again because he could mark the ball. But again, with an already inefficient forward line, having Asava there was painful. You saw it in the Sydney game. You saw it in the Geelong game. Like, you just weren't getting enough goals from those forward entries. And we just need more players that can actually produce goals.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you know this about football, but kicking goals is really, really good. So
almost as if
Hopefully
it's
Jack
one of the
location.
most important facets of the game.
Yeah. Like, there's two things you should probably do really well. You should kick a lot of goals and prevent your opponents from kicking goals. You do that, you're in pretty good stead.
Yeah.
Finally wrapping up, Joe Richards, again, highly rated at Collingwood, not enough to be traded. I think I used that line before. Sorry for the repeat. But yeah, any forward line improvement for Port and is very, very valuable. Can probably be seen in round one, as long as he has a good preseason. Speed, pressure, what he can provide is probably a decent finisher from what I've seen, and it's hard to look at the stats because obviously he didn't play enough to where it's that comparable. But I think we're also looking from a bit of a class from him because we have a player like Jackson Mead. He's pretty good for pressure and all that. He's sort of probably what Frankie Evans should be doing is like the worst. Like Jackson Mead is a lot better at being the worst forward for Port than Jackson Mead. You know what I mean? Like that would be that's what I want to see this year. And you put a player like Joe Richards. I hope he will be a bit better than Mead. But you know what I mean. As I said, he should be an actual small forward with a bit of craft.
Yeah.
Whereas Mead was sort of playing as a forward that we want to eventually push into the midfield.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. It's fair enough.
Right. Reasons for optimism. I know it's been a bit of a mixed bag, but I'm generally optimistic about where Port's going to go. But, as I said, every year it just seems like Port is a barometer of consistency in the regular season. Never won under 10 games under Ken Hinkley. And it wouldn't be surprising. It would...
Did you word that correctly?
Wait, what?
What? Is that correct?
So I've read it wrong. I said it would be surprising if this is the team. I think they'll still get over 10 wins. I thought I'd just put the pessimism in because I was reading it as like, I wouldn't be surprised if this team went under 10. I was like,
okay. That makes more sense now. No, you're good. Go on.
Yeah. So I expect them to get over 10 wins, even if it takes a few games for the forward to click, even if the back structural changes take a bit. They've still often had productive seasons with these problems, and I think it would take a bit more to actually see a decrease. I know a few people are like, yeah, disappointing, but they still tend to do good, and they are pretty great at winning against teams that they should beat. They don't get too many shock losses. Probably last year the worst was A, against Adelaide, which you sort of expect anyway, and B, the Gold Coast game, which they probably should have won. So yeah, probably have one of the best midfield units in the competition. I said if not the best, but I don't actually rate it as number one. But I could put the argument for top four. And a lot of these players compose for in forward stoppages. So not only just players like Willie Rioli that live down there, but Horn Francis gets a lot. Rosie, even though he missed a lot of those general shots, was still producing a lot. And Zach Butters is obviously the main one. So there's a lot of threats when it comes to that. So again, so sort of because they generate a lot of score from stoppages and they have such a meters gain playstyle, they actually match up against other team. You know what I mean? Other dominant teams, like because other territory teams they don't actually have as good a structured defense as Port has. So because Port can generally get it out easily enough, and they get enough goal from stoppages where other teams tend to give up possession in the defensive stoppages to get offensive movement. It gives Port a niche advantage. Like I said, Port tend to struggle against like the shutdown teams. Even Geelong, Geelong was probably the case of like a forward half team that absolutely spanked them, but for most part they do all right.
Yeah.
And then, again, the recruiting and off-season choices, like most years, have made sense. And even though some moves in the past have been a bit elbow-rousing, I think almost all of Port's main recruits in recent history have contributed positively, and there's no reason why I don't believe that they could add to their 2025 campaign. And when I say the eyebrow-raising ones, I don't think they've been as bad, but, moves like Tom Rockcliffe, Jack Watts, other minor things as well. But even someone like not Marlon Motlop, Stevie Motlop.
Stevie Motlop. Yep.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, we get sometimes inconsistent players. We sort of expect they improve holes, but that's just what you got to do as a non-Victorian team. You know what I mean? Like, unless they're players from Adelaide, you gotta have some sacrifices. You know what I mean? It's only really powerhouse teams that tend to drag players away at full form that are outside of Victoria. So,
Yeah, that's right.
I think most of the times it's fairly logical.
Right.
And now reasons for pessimism. And, it's quite often to say as a Port fan that things are just the same as they ever were, And the big fear is that under Hinkley's structure, it's not really a matter of when, it's we know what's not going to happen. And unless we change stuff, we're just going to see what we see at last year and all the other years, that we just failed to deliver consistently against high level opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Brute forcing it is all well and good, but Port struggle to generate turnovers. So if opponents are patient, they can score big off the turnovers that they generate themselves, especially those off the forward half. Because, as I said, Port, they don't overuse the ball, obviously, from their possessions, but they are gunslinging, moving the ball forward at all costs. And, patient teams, they know that they're going to get that score. Even if defensively it's okay, even if, there's a bit of a struggle for some of their routine things, they'll know they get easy points at some point. And it just makes it so, you're facing Port with so much more confidence than you probably need to be playing. Second of all, Port have lost a fair bit of depth. I don't ever think that they were like the heaviest depth team. But it is getting to the stage where I think, you're leaning towards that maybe like this is the end of the flag tilt. And maybe the best chances of that flag was actually a couple of years ago when they had a slightly better forward line. And, it's like, it's sort of hard, because it's very in between team. The coaching drama just adds to it, and you sort of feel like you're wasting a few years.
Yeah.
Like, it's not bad, but, every Port fan has the back of their mind that, it's just another wasted year. Going to the first point, but you know what I mean? When jobs are on the line, you're often thinking of what could have been.
Yeah.
And finally, to finish off, Port finished second, but it was in a team where they may have just scraped the top four in other years. And, as I said, they sort of put them in a position where they can be conservative and be like, oh yeah, a lot's gone right, so we can continue to do what we did last year, and just hope things go well again with our new players. But I really do think there needs to be some structural changes in both defensive and attacking mindsets. I don't think tall and slow worked last year in defense, and I don't think pure pressure works as a Hinkley forward line, even though that's what he sort of goes to. So, again, you can't just be banging their head against the wall. They need actual change to break into that premiership.
Yeah.
And that might not happen until Josh Carr comes in. And we don't even know if that's 100% guaranteed to work. So,
yeah, because there's a fair chance that when you do, when you have a succession plan with an existing assistant coach, there's no guarantee that they're going to keep most of what you've already been teaching this playing group, and they might go in a completely different direction.
yeah, exactly. And, you hope that they take the best things of your former coach while breathing a breath of fresh air.
Yep.
But, sometimes the opposite problem. Sometimes I actually, get too conservative, try and play like the old coach without the best, because obviously they're new, they're trying, and you sort of want things to be different. But sometimes the worst thing you could do is just be another of the same old coach.
Yeah.
So hopefully that won't happen. I still have optimism, despite some Ports fans not. But anyway, so overall, Psyrick's verdict, where do I place my team? They're in a weird position, very banal statistically, when we went through it. But really, you could say Port beat teams consistently. until the matchups where they got flogged.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, they just had some matches where they weren't in it. And that sort of added some discrepancy. And as it said, for such discrepancies, they still finished second, which to me is quite amazing, and a bit lucky. I think they should make the eighth. I didn't put him in as a lock. I thought it was sort of a bit disrespectful to Hawthorn, to be honest, because I put them as the same range as them. I sort of see these sort of two teams, a bit at the opposite end, like Hawthorn's approaching their structure that they want for the next 5 years or whatever, where Port's like an older team with enough talent, got a good core, but need to make those changes to be a consistent threat. So I got 3rd to 9. I really don't think they'll drop out the 8, but at worst, again with the injuries, again, if stuff doesn't gel, I could definitely see it happening. But my gut feel, 4th. Again, bias be damned, but they Port looked pretty average and wound up in the top 4 most of the past decade. So I got a feeling that that's going to be the same thing. It's just I wouldn't put them that much above the top 4. So not surprisingly, 4th on the ladder, the final one of the top 4. So going into the rest, we've got 7th spot open, 12th spot open, 14th spot open, and 17th spot open as we head into the St Kilda Saints.
The only spot, yes, we will move on into St Kilda. But looking at your ladder and the way you've laid it out, the only 2 spots that I don't have 100% confidence in is 12th and 14th. Because it could be, one of them could be St Kilda. That's likely a tossing up between St Kilda and the Bulldogs, right? But which one is in which? That I don't know yet, and we're about to find out.
Yeah.
Because everywhere else we can guess pretty convincingly. But 12th and 14th are the harder 2.
West Coast was 7th.
Yeah, exactly. Easy. West Coast is 7th, and the Sydney Swans are 17th.
Overrated.
Agreed. Especially... No. We're good. All right, St Kilda. My secondary team, as I like to call them. My best friend is a St Kilda supporter. I got family friends that are St Kilda supporters. I went to a bunch of St Kilda games in 2023. I didn't go to as many in 2024 due to personal life stuff. But we will start with taking a gander at their season and their overall... and the overview of the season as a whole. So after scraping through to the 2023 final series, where they got, therefore then got decimated. Oh, look at that. What do you know?
Snap the Yowie. I want him from my Yowie chocolate.
Fair enough. I mean, he's wearing
gotta bring him with him.
He's wearing a St Kilda Guernsey, so, it makes sense for him to be here.
Yeah. Fairly happy for a St Kilda supporter, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know whether he just sleeps through the bad performances or what, but you do what you do to survive.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, as I was saying, they managed to scrape through to the 2023 final series and then got decimated by the Giants. Hopes for St Kilda to consistently improve and potentially make a play for a top 4 position in 2024 were high. As we now know, it did not happen at all. With the loss of Max King early on, and St Kilda's forward line had very little opportunity to score from inside 50 and their middling midfield, despite the efforts of Jack Steele, Jack Sinclair, their captain, and defender Cal Wilkie, doing everything they could to create opportunity. Recording only 5 wins before the mid-season bye, St Kilda did some slight retuning and went on to win 6 games post-bye, including surprising wins over Sydney, Geelong, and Carlton. The big Carlton one coming in round 24, when Carlton really... Sorry, round 24, when Carlton really needed to win that to secure their place in finals, and instead they had to leave it all the way up to Fremantle and Port Adelaide that same night. But yeah, hopefully, if you're a St Kilda fan, you're hoping that they with the form that they showed in those big games, they're able to carry that through the off-season and into 2025. So as we can see here...
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say, can I hijack this for a second?
No, go for it.
Because you see on the slide, and I actually added this without telling you. I forgot I did this. But I added the round 17 post-Ben King injury just to sort of separate. And disclaimer, I am in no way saying that Ben King,
Is the problem.
is holding the team back or whatever. I'm just saying, like, when Blaze is talking about the fact that they retooled after the King injury, like, they found options. Like, it wasn't consistent. You saw a few games where they got smacked out of the park, but the record, 6 and 8, points per game, 83.13. For St Kilda, they're, like, not averaging 80 most years. I mean, they would be under this year, but even in the good years, they're not, so it's not bad.
I mean, well, a lot of that goes to Tim Membry and Jack Higgins for creating a lot of opportunity up forward, because Membry had to get a little bit more playtime in place of Max King. We will talk about Membry's move to Collingwood in a moment. And yeah, and then like obviously Marcus Windhager stepped up a bit more, helping with ball traversal. Wanganeen Miller did a lot more across the wing. Mason Wood also stepped up a lot as well. And so they had other players have to like step up post Ben King injury to fill that void. And yeah, as I said, they've retooled to some form of success. Wasn't enough to really be substantial, but it was a positive sign.
I mean, honestly, with that draw, 6 and 8's pretty solidly. Like, it was very much up and down. Like, they're some of the hardest teams, they're some of the easiest, but it's honestly not bad. But yeah, as I said, they want to look at the structure that led to that increase in scoring and try and add that for next year.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, on to your statistics.
Yes, and look, anyone can almost tell you one of the biggest problems with the St Kilda Saints is their forward line.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to win any prizes for unveiling this. But, I think the next biggest thing is sort of, it trickles down the field. So, we start with their pure offense. 18 goals per game, 15th in the league, pretty poor. Shots, healthy-ish, 23.1, 12th in the league, considering the low amount of inside 50s. Only 49 per game, tied 15th. So 12th isn't actually bad, like, in perspective. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, considering how few. And you can sort of see it with the goals per inside 50, shots per inside 50, 22.5 for goals inside 50, 13th in the league. Set shots per inside 50, 42.4, 13th in the league. It's not a bottom four offense. Goals assists, though, fairly low. Very low amount of goal scorers. Only 7 unique goal scorers on average per match at 16th. Their accuracy was very bad, 47.8, which is 12th in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a couple of... We're going into, like, next free stats, which just surprised me. Marks inside 50, 12.5, 6th in the league. Again, with the low inside 50 rate. When you convert that to a mark inside 50 rate, 25.5, second in the league. So, when you consider Carlton's one of them, GWS, all that sort of thing, you don't really put St Kilda in there.
No, but surprisingly, they have some pretty good hands up forward.
Yeah. And this is what amazed me. I actually had to double check when I originally did this, that I wasn't misreading this as like a percentage thing. But defensive half score, they scored 37.2 points per game. And I know this isn't to do purely with offense, but that's tied first in the league with Geelong. Raw score. So they were generating so much more off back half, but their forward half game was absolutely abysmal. As you can see in the next stat, they scored under their defensive half score, which I don't think any other team did that last year. That's 31.5 at 18th. So they're an absolute anomaly where their forward half game is so bad that their defensive half score outranks it. So
yeah, that's
the good news
crazy.
is they've got a solid avenue for score, and if their forward line improves a bit, it's actually structured okay. The bad news is obviously, is that they really struggle because they get a lot of forward 50 ground ball gets, which is 15.9, which is 6th. But again, with that shot generation, or the limited amount of entries, the fact that they're not probably converting some of these marks and ground ball gets into general play shots and what do you call them, set shots. Yeah, their opposition rebound rate, they just grind it out. Opposition's rebound at a success rate of 76.3, which is 13th in the league. So they don't hold on to the ball unless they mark it. So much ado about nothing, really.
Yeah.
So we'll go into the other side. A nice mirror image for the Saints. Their goal against, 11 goals conceded per game, 11th in the league. A nice 0 differential between the goals they produce and the goals against. So, yes. Sorry, that should be tied first in the league. You're right. There's 3 teams. I think it's Fremantle, St Kilda, and G-Dubs? I can't remember.
Teams with really good defenses, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Goals per inside 50 against 22nd, 22% to get a goal per inside 50 against the Saints defense, which is the 4th best in the league. Set share per inside 50, 22.8, which is tied 3rd in the league. Rebound rate per inside 50, 75% points, 75.6% chance. Tied 6th in the league for any entry to just get rebounded. Mark inside 50 rate, 23.4, which is 11th in the league. So of all these good stats, the one area that they could probably prevent is opposition marks, which we will talk about. Big loss will be Josh Battle. And we're going to talk about like how big that might turn this defense, because it's by far the best piece and they can't afford it getting any worse.
Yeah, correct.
With their, perspectives. Opposition tackles inside 50, they only get 9 tackles per game, so 3rd. So when they get it, they tend to use the ball quite well. Again, going back to that defensive half score being quite high. Opposition forward half score, so despite being putrid themselves, they actually restrict them to 34.6, which is 2nd in the league. Opponent stoppage scores 28.4, which is 4th in the league. So they do concede a tiny bit from centre bounce, but in general, they're really good at most areas. And opposition forward 50 ground ball gets, they average 86.4, which is 5th in the league. So they're a tall-ish defense, not the fastest in the league, but although they let a few marks go their way, they're really good at keeping oppositions honest. They cover their poles pretty well.
They do.
And as I said, because they're so structured, so well set up, that then transfers to their rebounders, like as you're talking, Nasai Mangami-Malira, Jack Sinclair when he's back there. So it's only as I said, they did lose Riley Bonner. We'll talk about that. But overall, they've got some really good users in the back half, and their back line is very fantastic. Where it gets a bit iffy, though, is their midfield, especially their inside midfield. Because again, talking about efficiencies, high disposals, 36.4, which is 5th in the league. Disposal differential makes them seem a bit more porous. They only get 8 more disposals than their opponents, which is 9th in the league. So they get a lot of disposals. Their opponents get a lot of disposals. Their kicking percent efficiency, 62.2, which is 3rd in the league. But they favour a lot of short kicks. Meters per disposals, 15.9, 15th in the league. They're one of the few teams to be a kick favouring team. I think there's 2 teams. So obviously that's 9th or higher, being kick favouring, not over 50%, that have a bottom for meters per disposal. So they don't move the ball that far. Inside 50 differential, they give up 1.1 to their opponents. So it's bad, but it's not tragic. It's 11th in the league. Center clearances, absolutely lowest in the league, though, 18th. Stoppage clearances, pretty low as well, 23.8, 15th in the league. Their differential is a bit better, and it makes sense when you think about their game plan. They're not scoring many goals. They're not giving many goals against. So there's not as many stoppages. It tends to be like a high amount of turnovers, and a lot between the arcs. As you mentioned early in the year, as I mentioned, one of the most boring teams to watch in the first half of the year. it would just be a lot of middle work reaching into nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They would work so hard to prevent the opposition from doing much and not generate themselves. And we can see from the post clearances, despite being arse garbage at the clearance, they're first at post clearance center possession, which is first, and post clearance ground ball get, which is first. 62.4. I'm not guessing I've just accidentally put the same thing twice, but they're actually both first in both. But yeah, so essentially, once the clearance guts, they're really good at forcing a turnover, but you got to imagine how defensively they're structured means that they're not getting first hands on the ball at the same time. And even though Ron Marshall, I haven't put ruck stats in, he's considered one of the premier ruckmen in the league. He's great around the ground, but he doesn't actually get the ball to midfielders. And that just sort of goes with the Saints play style. Again, another team that's very high on the clanger differential. So they're producing a lot of balls that go nowhere. Tied 16th of the league, get 3.9 more than their opponents. High marking team, again, goes with that chip mark sort of game style I said before, but worth noting, one or two teams to break the 100 mark with Brisbane at 104.6 marks per game.
Mm-hmm.
Intercept differential, though, could be a lot better. Opponents get one more intercept than them, which is 12th in the league. But as I mentioned, for a team that struggles to score, that's where you sort of want to see those sort of stats get up a bit more, generate more one-on-one contests.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely fantastic on the ground. Ground ball gets 91.4, which is tied 5th in the league. The differential, +5 more than the opponents, which is 3rd in the league. And crumbing from marking contests, they're absolutely 1st in the league at 25. So they are okay at restricting opposition marks. And when it goes to ground, they're pretty good at winning it back too. So, yeah, as I said, so it's not untenable like a lot of their stats. Like, there's definitely a lot of positives. It's just the chasm of their offense and the fact that their ball use isn't generating enough to where it's so ridiculous that their back half movement is just so much better.
Yeah.
And generates most their score. And, you know, also, again, they're one of the few teams where probably their outside mids you would probably rate over their inside mids in like the combination of, you know, whether it's Liam Henry, Brad Hill, Mason Wood, even Nasiah when he pushes up a bit, you know, all that sort of thing. So yeah, a lot of good movement. Inside just needs a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings us on to our list changes. So we'll start with the outs because, as you mentioned just before, Josh Battle is the biggest out. He was out of contract, wanted a new change of scenery, so he went over to Hawthorn, who were, you know, massively, who were pretty much targeting him all year, along with obviously Barras as well. We talked about that.
Getting that big money for him.
Last week before, last week. But yes, like it was one of the bigger trades trades, free agency,
free agency.
Same kind of thing at this point. In the off season, Tom Campbell, kind of a journeyman, just as like a secondary tall, mostly like a second, third ruck. Has gone over to Melbourne, kind of as a backup for Max Gawn. Delisted Jack Hayes, one of the many Jacks that St Kilda had on their list. Seb Ross, that one I was very surprised about with Seb Ross. Same with obviously, although yeah, he hadn't really
Seb Ross is a player that you're always expecting him to develop more than he actually ever did.
So yeah, true.
I think it's about time to cut the losses there.
Ben Patton, just, you know, a developing player that didn't really go anywhere. Same with Ollie Houghton and Matthew Ellison and James Van S. But Tim Membry was the other one that no one was really expecting to be delisted specifically.
Yeah.
And we say that because of how much of an impact he had on like post King injury, essentially. Like he became basically that number one up forward for the most part. He had brilliant hands.
Yeah.
He was always in the right spot, and he did everything that he could to keep St Kilda on track in that second half. And
No,
then, but
absolutely, and it's like only out of necessity, and you weren't expecting him to do decently, but he went above what you would expect. So
yeah, and then for some reason they delist him. I don't know if he was going to get picked up in the rookie draft or something. I got no idea.
hmm.
I couldn't find out any information on that when we looked at it originally. But then Collingwood swooped him up, and now he's
Yeah,
over at the Magpies. So, fair chance he could possibly play finals this year.
probably, honestly. Did I put them in the 8? Might have put him ninth. I can't
I
remember.
can't remember where he
But
put it. We'll look at it in a minute
yeah.
anyway. And then for the ins, they got Jack McRae as a trade from the Bulldogs. Jack Carroll, who was a delisted free agent at Carlton, came over. And then Harry Boyd, who they signed by the supplemental selection period. And then from the draft, they also had a fairly decent draft hand and took advantage of that with Toby Travaglia at pick 8, Alex Toru at pick 10, James Barat at pick 32, Hugh Boxall, yeah. It's a
Maybe
weird.
Boxall.
It might be. It's kind of a weird. We'll find out when he actually gets called in terms of
Hopefully
commentary.
it comes on. Yeah.
At pick 45, Alex Dodson at pick 35, Patrick Said at pick 60, and Amon, I assume, Amon Armstrong
And then,
as a
yeah.
Category B rookie. Oh, and also Brad
Category
Crouch
B rookie.
also retired. One retirement that we did probably see, being the older one out of the Crouch brothers. The other one still maybe got another year or two at Adelaide before
Yeah, I hope
he
so.
comes to retirement. But for the most part, Brad had a fairly solid fairly solid career. But yeah, it was just that time for him.
Injury catching up for him, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was
he
like
was
if he gets
out.
another injury, it's long-term
Yeah, he was out
consequences.
a fair amount because of it. All right, I see you've made a change here. I did actually spot this, but I wanted to bring it up before I talk about the full list of players of importance.
Yeah, honestly,
Oh yeah, because he's
we
injured,
put
isn't
him
he?
at we put him Mateus Philippi. Well, Blazy did.
I did.
And I felt bad for putting out his hard work, but yeah, clearly he's injured and won't be a part of it. When he comes back, you could probably mention the same point. I just crossed it out for the purpose of this slide, so you can talk about him. Yeah.
All I was
Also
really going
didn't
to
even
say
put
is
him in
that he had
position.
he had a consistent year despite despite what the stats really
Yeah.
say. But because he only played 13 games, he only played half the season because of injury. He likely was going to play alongside Steele and McRae in that sort of forward midfield sort of section.
Yeah,
Former
I was
number
gonna
10
say
draft
he
pick.
looked a
Fun
lot
fact.
better as a midfielder than he did in the forward line.
Yeah, he's got that decent height as well to be able to kind of flow between the both, or like in that in
Yeah.
that half sort of positioning. Anyway, let's talk about the actual top dot point of this list, and that's with Cooper Sharman and Max King. We can cross off Max King at this point because he's injured yet
Well,
again.
that's the thing. I crossed him off. I wrote it against Keeper Sharman because again, when he wrote it, I heard ACL injury. I was like, oh crap, it's probably in. And then the news comes out it wasn't actually an ACL, and he's like
Thankfully,
maybe a round 2, round 3. So I put them together because it's sort of similar points where they
yeah,
need some key forward.
it
I
really is a
think,
similar
and
point.
Blazy will take it away from here.
Yeah, so usually St Kilda's primary key forward is Max King, as everyone kind of knows, but he's just injury prone at this point. But hopefully, post this current injury that he's dealing with, he looks to become their most valuable goal scorer again in 2025, having scored 47 goals in the past 2 seasons, as well as 52 goals in 2022. So we know he can kick some solid bags. It's just about getting that consistency and a good run of form. Cooper Sharman has looked decent, but has only averaged 67% time on ground in his career. So the 93 centimeter, 88 kilogram, 93 centimeter, 193 centimeter.
That
He's not that short.
yeah. I was gonna say like 88 kilos is like pretty light for 193. For 93 centimeters though, that's
that's
almost a
a
kilogram per
heavy lad.
centimeter.
88 kilo forward, should be asked to take more responsibility as King eases his way into the season when he gets back. It kind of just goes on to the whole offensive stats that we were talking about earlier. Is that just having some solid core, like some sort of solid core or group of players that have decent consistency together in that forward line will attribute to better stats. And hopefully, when King gets back and does not get injured again, and hopefully with Sharman just having a little bit more game time, they'll be able to get to that because they already have some decent small forwards that kind of already like are consistent enough. Like you've got Butler and Higgins being like kind of the main two up there, but they're not as consistent as they should be because they don't always have the reliable like taller forwards around them.
Yeah, exactly. And, so we saw Higgins have an absolutely fantastic end to last year, but it's a lot to ask him at his age to basically be like a Toby Green-esque player where you can sort of win off his own boot. They just need more support around that, even if they do go small ball, even if they do focus on the small forwards.
Yeah.
They can't just be, I don't want to say Higgins and nothing, but you know what I mean? It can't just be like Sam Max King flailing, hope he gets enough goals, and if it like crashes, hope Higgins cleans a mess. Like there needs to be more variety in their attack.
Yeah, exactly right. And then I put Isaiah Wanganeen-Miller right here. Despite the stats saying he had an elite year off the halfback / the wing, his decision-making skills were put into question in many of St Kilda's games. From majority of the ones that I saw, he's not a very good decision maker, and that's just something he needs to kind of work on himself.
Yeah.
Again, as I put
here,
but... experience can only grow a player positively anyway. So
yeah.
I think he's a solid player overall. It's just sometimes opportunities aren't always there.
Honestly, I think it just comes to like St Kilda's game plan, where like for him, he was always the one to send it long to those like clanger type kicks, like because Saints they didn't muck around with like ball use. If I know that I said they had a lot of chip kicks, but when you look at like the back half movement, a lot of them were like very long down the wing, and it would be short going into the forward line and short coming out of the forward line.
Yeah, exactly.
But a player like Messiah would launch it, and I think what you're saying, and I'd probably agree, is like the balance is a bit off. I'm not sure whether that's part of the system or whether it's him, but I can definitely see why.
Yeah, he might have just been encouraged to always just go for the longer options rather than looking short.
Yeah,
and that might just never be any short options.
And look, as I said, he was also compared to Riley Bonner as well, who was like a lot worse. So you know what I mean? Like he looked a lot better just even by comparison. So
yeah, very true. And then Hunter Clark, part of the midfield changes for St Kilda in the back half of the season. He was very solid in most things except disposal efficiency, which due to a lack of preseason can be excused. It's true, if you don't get like a really solid preseason in, either due to injury or whatever, it can really affect your development just as you go further into the season. Doesn't always get his body right. Something Saints fans hate to hear. It's something everyone hates to hear because you always want healthy players anyway.
Yeah, true.
But the former number 7 draft pick seems to add a bit of aggressive ball use to their midfield unit, and that's true. And he's really solid on ball. It's just getting that consistency and decent form in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just one of those things where, again, where that inside to outside connection gets a bit better, because obviously it was shocking. Like I said, not many clearances. So, when your clearances dry up, you also get the point where, especially if it's a young team, you don't get a feel for that connection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like like I said, I feel like every team gets like a star midfielder, and I always think like, you don't win your game off your best midfielder, but you still need your best midfielder to be really relevant and in it.
Unless you're
Jack
Carlton.
Steele, well, you have like multiple, but like Jack Steele is very solid. But I always felt like he was a defensive player forced into like the ball winning role. And honestly, I think in another existence is like one of the best, is like almost like Matt Rowell, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like his best, he can accumulate the ball, but you want someone alongside him, so he can do the other roles that like cohese? adds cohesion to a midfield unit.
Yes. All right, on to our new faces. First one being Jack McRae, having left the Dogs in the off-season, one of the bigger, I would say one of the bigger movements, like one of the surprising movements in the off-season, but we kind of knew that there were a couple of players that were wanting to leave the Dogs, McRae being one of them. He looks to continue his career with the Saints with a bang, with game 250 on the horizon. Known for his forward pressure and marking capabilities, McRae offers versatility up forward for the Saints as a solid second or third option alongside King and Cooper Sharman in that case.
Yeah, because as I said, like, I mean, theoretically, Jack McRae's a winger, but like every Dogs player under the sun, all of their midfielders put like shoved in the forward line. I think that's, as you said, like some of the experience they're probably going to draw on.
Unless you're Rory Lobb, then you get shoved into the back line.
Yeah, true, but as I said, well, Rob was in a mid. Well, I guess Rock, yeah, midfield. I don't know. I don't know the exact mechanisms of it, but
I'm not going.
if you're a forward, you go to the back line. If you're a midfielder, you go to the forward line. You can only see him if you're a defender. You go into the midfield. We haven't seen that happen. That's going to be in the next phase of the Bulldogs. But as for Jack McRae,
who knows? It might come
adding
up
to
when we
the
talk
St
about
Kilda
it next
forward
week.
line, the big need.
Yes, absolutely. Moving on to the two big draft picks, Toby Travaglia, number 8 draft pick. Toby has been touted as a strong on-baller with the ability to break tackles and succeed in clearance rate and pressure acts. Pretty much what they need, really. It's, again, like you've got Steele in there, but it's not always enough to have Steele being that on-baller, because, again, as you said, it's probably not the role that he was built for. It was kind of the role he was just forced into.
I mean, he can. Like, it's a good aspect of his game that exists, but clearly, like, if Jack Steele was going to lead this midfield to overwhelming success, it would have happened right now.
Yeah.
Like, clearly, you just need another element to it, because it can't be Jack Steele on his own. And I rate him as one of the better players of the league. Like, it's not me knocking him. It's just, unless you're, like, top 5 midfielders, like a Bontempelli, like a Cripps, like a Petrarca, it becomes very hard.
Yeah, exactly right. And then Alexander Toru, the number 10 draft pick. Alex will fill the role of Josh Battle in the development process, working alongside Cal Wilkie and Dougal Howard once he's back from injury. As
another bracket I had to add in.
Yes, but that's fine. As a one-on-one or shutdown defender. It could also be touted as an intercept defender as well if need be. But I think just in terms of how their structure works, like one-on-one and shutdown defense will probably be his specializations.
Yeah.
And then our reasons for optimism. The positive showings towards the end of the 2024 season, which might shift currently because of Josh Battle not being there anymore and, all that. Gives Saints fans some hope going into 2025, and I believe Ross Lyon has been able to develop his young players in a way that will see much quicker improvements from them throughout 2025. I've been thinking about this a little bit earlier, and I think he's kind of like planning a rebuild, but also not like a full rebuild, because he's still got a lot of decent talent that he's like kept left over.
Yeah,
but that was kind of ended up being what I considered, because of like the Membry and Sepros like delistings. But
yeah, and I think I sort of mentioned it because I think I wrote one of these points. But because they weren't too far away in 2023, because they have some structure, they can actually look at this and say, hey, we don't actually need as much as we think to change to see results. It's just, again, figuring out a way to get that forward line a bit more functional and that mid to forward connection available.
Yeah, exactly right. And like, again, they had 6 picks in the draft, which, for a team who might not initially look like they were rebuilding, it does look like they're trying to like do a semi rebuild over possibly still trying to play for a viable at least top 10 position, really. Like they're trying to show that they've improved, whilst also kind of setting themselves up for a better future long term.
Yeah, exactly.
The next point is that changes have happened to St Kilda, but they are still set as a back half unit. If they can get any semblance of growth out of at least one of the inside midfield players or the forward line in general, then they are a team that can definitely get back to a ladder position or win percentage they had in 2023, which is pretty much the same points that we were talking about just then.
Yeah.
Just all about hopefully showing a little bit of better development on top of long-term planning essentially.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just reading the next point.
No, you're good.
I was
Yeah. So speaking of the next
trying my
point,
hardest
I
not to
will
get clickbaited.
talk about the next point. St Kilda's entered 2024 found that they can actually generate scores without their spearhead and Max King. In no way do you think, because I didn't write this, they should play without him. But for a young team, just seeing that they can score without needing to dump the ball into their only tool could see more creative attacks and get more score from just defensive path play and intercepts, which goes on to exactly what we were talking about earlier anyway.
Yeah. So, again, disclaimer, because I don't.
You
no one's
clearly
going to take me
just
out
want
of
to dog on
context with this,
a bunch of players this week.
dogging it on King. I'm defending him. I'm like saying, I'm not like, for me, it goes like to the Ewing effect. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but in sports, there was a statistic that said the New York Knicks in their prime actually won more games without Patrick Ewing. Or they had a better win percentage without him than with him. And it's like one of those pointless statistics where like you can sort of see, because like in those games, you might plan a bit more, you might try and find more creative ways to generate options.
Yeah.
But in like a long-term season, you're still going to want him. You know what I mean? It's always healthy to figure out how you can cope without him at the same time. And that's how you sort of grow as a club.
Yeah, exactly right. And then on to our reasons for pessimism. The lack of free trade or lack of trade/free agency movement leaves a lot to be decided in terms of St Kilda's structure. The signing of a seasoned second wingman and another tall defender to better replace Josh Battle would have been a better thing to see. And I agree, like, as much as, getting someone from the draft and developing them as a replacement for Josh Battle is fine. It would have been better to find someone ready-made to just fill that spot straight away so they can have the same kind of consistency that they had in 2024, at least in, terms of defense.
I think this is your point, because I probably wouldn't have said second wingman. I probably would have said more forward.
Close enough.
Which I guess I kind of did. I don't know. It depends where you think Jack McRae's going to go, but, because if you think he's going to play on the wing, then they did get a second wingman. If you think he's going to play forward, but, semantics at that point. But, it's definitely hard, because you can't just replace Josh Battle. You got to have it available. But the fact that they didn't just means there's a big negative. Like, it's not going to be a Houston to Farrell situation, like I said earlier. As I said, even if Howard was injured, Josh Battle to Howard is still a pretty steep step. And, he's not out, so you're looking at, like, Zane Cordy and youngsters.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned that in the last point. I don't need to be saying this now.
Yes, you did. So I may as well talk about that one now, and then we'll go to the other one later. Saints defense is their best thing, but their key defender stocks are low, and they just lost Josh Battle to Hawthorn. And Dougal Howard is out with injury for the first half of the season. So they'll be sending kids like Schoenmaker, who's only played 4 games, Alex Toru, who's, just got signed, and one of the two Anguses who have 7 games between them to support Cal Wilkie and Zane Cordy. And also,
I don't know
Sinclair
why I didn't put the name, but it's like McLennan and someone else. Sorry for my lack of professionalism this episode.
That's okay. Honestly, I didn't really take a massive look into their entire list. I will be honest. But yeah, that's exactly continues on from what we were talking about. Is that the loss of Josh Battle is huge, and it's a lot bigger than I think people are really going to be talking about. Because Cal Wilkie, we spoke about it at the end of the season, that he stepped up massively in that defense. He was one of the key parts of that defense, but Josh Battle did so much work down there, and he's going to be sorely missed.
Yeah, because Zane Cordy looked okay for a couple of games, and then I think he got injured, then came back and didn't do that well, or something like that. But yeah, you know what I mean? It's like you can have a bit of a core between them, but they just need something else. And as I found out, he did actually play a few games last year. It is Angus Hasty.
yeah.
19-year-old from last year's draft. Last year's the year before.
2023 draft. Yeah.
Yeah, so pick
Fair
number
enough.
33, round 22.
Oh, yeah.
Round 2.
Fair enough. And then our last point for pessimism, St Kilda have a lot of flexible position players, yet none of them can find a role where they can stay comfortably and not have other areas exposed. Sorry, Jack Sinclair being a halfback and inside mid, Mason Wood being a forward player and a wingman, Liam Henry being a small forward and a wingman, and Ryan Burns being a half forward flank slash wingman slash halfback, and Filippo as well being a forward slash wingman
Sorry, I
slash
added him
inside
after.
mid. There's too many of them. They can all provide sparking
Yeah.
areas, but in 2024, it seemed like a rotating cast, which hurt consistency.
Yeah. And even I made a tongue-in-cheek point when I crossed out Philippi. I put in his position question mark, question mark, question mark, because, as I said,
With him being out with injury, there's
they
no.
need a forward. They're like looking for him, and they're like, "Oh, Philippi's got a lot of talent." But then they like see him in the midfield. It's like, well, he's actually talented as a midfielder, so we need to play him as there. And then it's like, well, they've got holes in both, as I said, but it's hard just tossing the kids around like that. And, that's why I also put Ryan Burns, because I know he's the biggest name for St Kilda, but again, it's that same thing. You're sometimes seeing him in the half forward flank, sometimes seeing him at halfback, you sometimes see him on the wing. I know players can play that in between role, but again, it's just, a lot of these changes because you're moving another player, which means once that player goes, you have to fill another player in that spot. And, as I said, it's just a lot of magnet shuffling. And as I said, they weren't consistent last year, which for a young team, you want a bit of consistency just so players have a chance to develop and know the game that they're playing.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, and then on to your verdict.
Yeah, well, as I said, I feel like the Saints are still finding footing, Well, I think they'll still be finding footing in 2025. Obviously, they were all right in 2023, but I don't think they're quite looking steady. And with a big blow to their best key position players, obviously one getting delisted, and the injuries, I think they will struggle against, again, despite having, decently close contests with just the occasional blowout. Like Saints, again, they're a bit like the opposite of GWS. They were mainly losing, but it was mostly close, with the occasional just dud game. My predicted range, 9th to 14th, not 19th. Won't have that until Tassie comes, but they'll miss finals. We'll have that as a lock. And my gut feel is 14th, which is the worst of my range. But, when you're doing these, sometimes you just feel a bit more optimistic. But every team you put above on that upper one means that a team has to go down. And, with the injuries, with my just general not believing that the Saints play interesting or fun football, so there's a bit of bias there. And, yeah. Honestly, Gold Coast and St Kilda can be pretty interchangeable.
Yeah,
I don't know if there'll be that much difference, but
yeah,
I'm not
kind
sure.
of that's kind of where I'm sitting with the ladder that I'm still kind of putting together. Is like a couple of these teams could really just swap in an instant.
Yeah. Honestly, I do think like Saints are the one of the teams where I could see you put them a bit higher. I do think I'm being a bit pessimistic putting them 14th, but like, I don't know. I just get bad vibes, but it might just be because I get bad vibes from the Saints.
No, I mean they're one of those teams that just feel like they aren't really going anywhere as much as they try. It's so I get it. I get putting them that low. There's no guarantee that they're gonna.
And as I said, I don't talk about coaching that much, but I'm not a huge believer of this Ross the Boss, you know, rebuild, so to speak. Like they've got good areas, but as I said, I don't know, like that chasm for a well-seasoned coach. You just feel like that shouldn't have happened, even with the talent that they had last year. You know what I mean? Like
exactly right.
some of the stats that they're putting up this year were concerning, and now they're playing young players. It's like it's a bit of cusp of things not working. I don't think it's exactly. I still think they could go in the right direction. I just see it being a bit middling.
We just gotta hope that they go in the right direction.
Yeah. So, shall we finish up by going through the ladder to finish off the episode?
Before we touch on
First,
the Indigenous All-Stars game, yes.
Sorry. Before we finish the analysis, what I'm trying to say. First, the Geelong Cats. Second, the Brisbane Lions. Third, GWS. 4, Port Adelaide Power. 5, Hawthorn Hawks. 6, Fremantle Dockers. 8, Collingwood Magpies. Carlton Blues at 9th. Adelaide at 10th. Melbourne Demons at 11th. Gold Coast Suns at 13th. 14th, introduced St Kilda. 15th, the Essendon Bombers, rounding up the top 4. North Melbourne, 16th. 17th is a blank. Richmond, 18th.
Yes.
Which leaves 17th, 12th, and 7th to go to West Coast, Western Bulldogs, and Sydney in whatever order you think we're going to place them.
Well, I think you just pretty much named them exactly bottom to top. Being West Coast at 17th, the Doggies at 12th, and Sydney at 7th.
Maybe.
But we'll find out next
we'll
week
never know.
in episode 46. So that does it for our preseason analysis for the week, but we have one more bit of information to talk about, and that's the Indigenous All-Stars game being played over in WA this weekend. And we have, thanks to AFL.com.au, the ultimate guide to the game, and that's what we're going to touch on now. So,
first things first, because we haven't talked about it. I don't think we've mentioned on the podcast. Really sick jersey design, really sick bowl design.
I agree. It is.
So
they actually look so good, and I'm honestly half tempted to buy a Guernsey of my own because it's such a cool design.
Yeah. Now, I said my daddy could pick up some merch, so he might pick up a jersey. But if not, I might pick one up.
So it will be played.
my dad a ticket for a present.
It will be played at Optus Stadium. It'll be 7:30 p.m. AEDT on the East Coast, and for the West Coast, it'll be a 4:30 p.m. game. So pretty much prime time slot. It will be broadcast exclusively on Fox Footy and KO. So RIP free to air, but the free to air has other stuff going on. If you want to listen to radio coverage, most of the radio stations that normally have their footy will have it on there. Tickets are pretty cheap. If you don't already have a ticket for it,
WA audience.
Yeah, exactly right. If you don't already have a ticket and are still interested in going, $35 for an adult is pretty good, actually. Let's go on to the entire squad, because my word, there are some absolute champions of the game in this list. So I'm going to zoom in a bit just so the podcast can see, but we're going to go pretty much from the start. Do you want to read them down?
Okay, so we've got Kalamachi coming from Nungaland, Palku, and Nayunka, and Warrior. Obviously, a few of these regions span a few, so some players get bumped into a few. Carl Amon comes from Nunakul, Shai Bolton, Minang and Wilman, Jace Burgoyne, Kakatha, Larika and Warrior, Charlie Cameron from Waini and Aladil, Jeremy Finlayson from Yorta Yorta, Jade Gresham also from Yorta Yorta, Bobby Hill from Woodjut Country, Noongar and Balladong. Noongar sort of WA region. It's very expansive. A lot of the WAs will have Noongar in them. Brad Hill also from Wilman and Noongar. Jason Horn-Francis from Waterman. Lawson Humphreys, Nile Nile, Ulmaday and Warrior. Jamadintri from Yorta Yorta again. Joe Jeffrey, Kudach, and William. Ash Johnson, Yaru and Kija. Liam Jones, unfortunately, won't be playing, but he'll be around. He's injured. From Kija as well. Tim Kelly, Nunga, Wongi, and Yamatiji.
I'm not even going to try and pronounce them, I'll be honest. I'm surprised you're even giving it a go.
Oh, well, as I said, it's very important in the Indigenous, community where you come from. It's a lot of source of pride, so I thought I'd give it an attempt. Was that Cohen Livingston,
That is Cohen Livingston.
Balladog, Noongar. Ben Long from Aminajajiri. Stephen May from Larrakia. Jesse Motlop from Larrakia. Alex Pearce, again, unfortunately out, from Palawa. Kazai Pickett. Yamatiji, Noongar. Also, Alex Pearce from Tasmania. I never knew Palawa for Tasmania. So
yeah, he is a Tassie
I learned
boy.
something there. Yeah. Willie Rioli from the Tiwis, So from Morris, um, Liam Ryan from Yamatiji, Isaac Rankin from Kokalfa and Nijidiri, or Nijidiraji? I don't know.
I don't know.
Dustin Stengel from Warangu, Jasinkin again from Yoda Yoda, Michael Walters again from Wajak Wilman Nijidiri, Nazai Wangani Milira from Kokalfa Naranga, and Zach Williams from Wiriduji. Wiridujuri, sorry.
Yes.
And they will be
coached.
Oh, sorry, I was going to go through the coaches.
I mean, you can go through the coaches if you want.
Yeah, well, North Melbourne assistant Xavier Clark will coach the Indigenous All-Stars team, along with Port Adelaide's Jason Williams, Fremantle's Roger Hayden, North Melbourne's Jared Leanett, and West Coast Chance Bateman also on the coaching panel, which is very good to see. A lot of former players. Again, Jason Williams, I think, was Sandford level more.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Hayden used to be a big Fremantle player. Jared Leanett used to play for Port Adelaide in a small role and has developed into a coach. And Chance Bateman obviously used to play for Hawthorn only. Just Hawthorn. Wasn't Hawthorn Essendon, was it?
I got no idea, I'll be honest.
Anyway. Oh, he's a premiership player, I'm pretty sure.
Might be.
One of the more obscure ones. But yeah, he had the dreadlocks as well. You'd probably recognise if you see him.
Possibly.
Yeah, so obviously they're getting a bit of help from Sam Mitchell and Simon Goodwing. So, leading the helm, a lot of Indigenous players. Xavier Clark, too, also used to play for St Kilda and West Coast. Unfortunately, very injury.
That part I knew. He's also a former Richmond assistant coach before he moved over to North.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's known for his noggin. So, very good selection to coach the Indigenous side. And hopefully, you'll do him proud.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, the rest of the article just goes on about what this game means to the players and to the communities as a whole. And it's safe to say that this is something that I think the AFL as a whole has needed. Just something to better. Sure, we have Sir Doug Nicholls rounds, and that was always incredibly important for the community. Everyone loves Dreamtime and stuff like that. But having more ways to better show our appreciation for our Indigenous communities and our Indigenous players and their histories is so important to the league, and I think to the country as a whole, I'll be honest, because I know the NRL do something similar, or have done something similar. So I definitely think it's time that the AFL embraces that a lot more and hopefully expands upon it, and by doing this, gets rid of opening round, please.
Yeah, and I will say, especially from WA, obviously, Noongar region, it's one of those things where Indigenous culture, because we've still got a lot of older communities and all that, there is a rich history in WA that, unfortunately, it's a very big balance of, trying to promote it, trying to preserve it as much as we can, but still, as I said, there's that balance of, building infrastructure out there, and you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's so important, because we talk a lot about Indigenous players, we talk about a lot of Indigenous history, but not as much happens. Obviously in Victoria, there's still a lot, but, it's not the highest percentage of where every Indigenous community has been.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's very expansive. Each region normally has their own stories to tell, their own lore. So that's why I went through, the towns and regions. And, for them, to say, hey, from all over the map of Australia, this is where I come from. This is what I'm proud of. And, while we're all Indigenous players, we all have a lot of proud of our culture. And we're here to, show that, bring that to a wider audience. And, take it outside from Victoria, because as I said, while it is great to have that Dreamtime League, they're not playing because of, even the Trailblazer clubs like Essendon and all that, you got to acknowledge, even Fremantle, I suppose, it is good to acknowledge that they were the teams that, took those first steps. But nowadays, it's not so much about having Indigenous people play. And, there are, points where, there can be do more to support and, make sure, in terms of racism that they might face or discrimination. But we're getting to the point now where it's also about promoting their culture just as much, because we play in a league with Indigenous players. It's been happening for ages, and, they're a part of our league, and it is, just great for us to learn from them and their culture, while also, having a few conversations promoted that come up from their community.
Yeah, exactly right. Just as a very brief touch notes on the players themselves, the team will be captained by Michael Sonny Walters, with Charlie Cameron, Brad Hill, and Jarman Impey supporting him in the leadership group. And for the Dockers themselves, obviously they will be without Michael Walters, Shea Bolden, and Alex Pearce. Alex Pearce now due to injury, not just because he's part of the lineup. And they will also be without Hayden Young, who is also out injured. But that's not too bad because he'll come back like during the season anyway and be fine.
I think it's like a good thing where like you expect some of the higher ranked players to actually take the field a bit more. Like maybe you see like a final quarter with like a near full strength side, but like with this sort of thing, you're meant to see a lot of rotation. So the good thing is you're probably guaranteed to see a few players as long as they can play. But yeah, it's more about the celebration, the culture, the experience, as well as, as I said, just seeing this super team come together as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, like this is if this team was like naturally just like a regular AFL team, they would on paper be one of the strongest teams in the competition, and it's very scary to have that much talent right there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as I said, especially in that forward line, I said probably the one thing is key forwards are probably a bit lacking, but, in the midfield, they're well represented. In the back line, they're very strongly represented.
Mm-hmm.
And, they've got some of the best small forwards in the league.
Yeah, exactly right. But that brings us to the end of episode 45. Thank you all so much for coming to hang out and listening to us this week. I am meant to be streaming as of right now, but that is okay. We can be late for that because the podcast is far more important because we love to do this. Next week, we will talk about our last three teams and go back over the Indigenous All-Stars game and just wrap up any important notes and things like that from things we've seen. Hopefully no injuries to any player, hoping and praying. But Psyrick will be there. I don't know if he mentioned that, but he will be there. So he will give us some photos or like just, thoughts and opinions on the whole experience, which will be very cool to listen to. And yeah, Sydney, West Coast Eagles, Western Bulldogs, all next week. And as we approach the start of the season, things are going to get a little bit spicier in terms of content because we'll be back on track, but we might have a surprise or two in store. So
Yes. So look forward to that. I assume there's like an episode before the season starts as well.
I believe so. Because I don't know if it's this weekend or if it's next weekend that the practice matches start. I know this one counts as one of Fremantle's.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's
all in all, there's probably
week.
going to be an episode where we recap anything, like all the major injuries that we missed because of the preseason. The fact that we wrote some of these a bit older.
So. Yeah, exactly right. But yes,
we'll keep you up to date. We'll always do.
We'll sort it all. We'll be fine. But yes,
yeah.
Thank you all so much. If you want to go check out our socials, please do. Again, I'm active on Twitter and Instagram mostly. We do obviously post on the podcast socials every week. If you want to listen to us on a different platform that isn't YouTube, Psyrick is dead. We
might come back.
No, you're right. We obviously the podcast also goes out on Spotify, so please go check that out. Otherwise, we will love you and leave you. Thank you all so much, and we will see you all next week for episode 46. Take care.